The opportunity to have a dialogue with you on our perspective of affordable housing and what we're currently undertaking. And I will try to bracket some of our comments from a planning and zoning perspective that may be of relevance to the commission. As we kind of move forward through the slides, hopefully you'll see more of those coming soon signs around the city as we continue. We're fortunate to have a lot of activity that we want to cover with you. If you all remember, it was just a few months ago that we were before you for the zoning of the 1890 Ashley River Road project that backs up to Adele. And there is a conceptual rendering of what we're proposing to do now that we have that approval in place. We have six affordable units up top and mixed-use office space downstairs. We're diligently working through the preliminary process of entitlement as it relates to city permits and whatnot associated with that. But certainly, this process was a key piece of putting that together. We certainly appreciate the feedback working through that. But I want to just kind of paint a little bit of a picture of the CRC. The Charleston Redevelopment Corporation is a relatively, I think, new one to the city, broader base in terms of what we're doing and the breadth of the activities that we're carrying out. What I'll walk through with you are really in four basic pots. One is our financing activities. We're financing both multifamily projects, we're financing single-family townhomes for home ownership, some of our preservation work, as well as scattered site infill, like this Ashley River Road site that we're doing across the city. And then what seems to have garnered the most attention so far is the lending that we're doing as the financial intermediary on behalf of the city on its affordable housing bond program. But we're also extremely excited to discuss a little bit about our relationship with the Historic Charleston Foundation and what we're doing in terms of owner-occupied rehab through our Common Cause initiatives. John Shaw Johnson, Housing Community Development Director, is also the Vice Chair of the board.
She does a wonderful job with the city as well. So appreciate that.
So having certainly key players that understand the challenges of affordable housing, particularly when it starts going through the entitlement process, balancing competing interests as it relates to it. But those are our three founding partners as we'll kind of walk through it. And one of our goals and objectives for this year, our bylaws allow us to work throughout the entire county. But so far, we've worked primarily within the city limits of the city of Charleston. So we are looking actively into North Charleston and Charleston County to expand those efforts of work countywide. Next slide really just kind of starts to give a little bit of the CRC. Our flagship component unit of the CRC is the Palmetto Community Land Trust. Land Trust, while not a new concept and a new tool, still requires a lot of education, particularly when we start talking about home ownership. But most of the project units that you'll see of our production are being held in the land trust to preserve those long-term in perpetuity as affordable units. So on the for sale side, we do that through ground leases, whereby the owners are truly ground leasing putting the homes on top of the property. So it does require an education process because it is such a different content. Again, we are a community-based board, so we are technically what the HUD calls a CHODO, Community Housing Development Organization, which means that 1/3 of our board is elected from neighborhood representatives, community representatives, and you see, and our chairman extends his apologies that he is out of town for today, and I introduced Ms. Shaw Johnson and Red Records. We have Historic Charleston as another one of our founding members, along with the Housing Authority. Just a little visual, just to kind of give you a little bit of geographic dispersion of the projects that we're either constructing or lending on, give you a little bit of perspective. We'll walk through those in a little bit more detail, but just want to give you a little bit of perspective of what we've achieved in a fairly short amount of time. So I said I was going to start off about some of the lending. We're currently in the infrastructure stage of putting in road, water, and sewer for what is referred to as the Bermuda Point project. And as you see, that's been taken a few months ago, but construction progress continues. That will be 40 units as townhouses for sale. Those will not be in the land trust, but they will still be long-term affordable for 30 of those, and they're spread across 80% AMI affordability, all the way up to 100% of area median income as affordability. So we're trying to create some dispersion across our targeted markets. And the CRC, by the way, can, under its bylaws, work on projects up to 120% of the area median income. So clearly, we're clearly focused on affordability. Another townhouse development, also in West Ashley, that is in the planning and conceptual stage, that is still very much at the conceptual stage and going through the process of getting things to the city. And then preservation, I mentioned on those additional bullets, preservation. Affordability challenge in the city remains tough, and certainly we are one tool in the toolbox. There are a number of actors who are each trying to do their own thing as it relates to both rental and home ownership, but we can't afford to lose units either. So as low-income housing tax credits age out of their compliance period, we have taken an initiative to try to purchase those to keep them from becoming market rate units so that we can keep those long-term affordable. Seattle Apartments represents 48 of the 81 units that we've done that successfully. And then you'll see on the next slide, 36 units of elderly projects at the North Central Apartments on King Street. Again, those are being purchased by the CRC through the Emerald Community Land Trust to keep those units affordable for the long term. Now, that sounds good, that sounds great, but it is tough because continuing to serve 60% and below as affordability continues to be a challenge, just as much as a challenge in getting those units on the ground, but continue to operate. And then I mentioned on the initial was the scattered site infill. When I say infill, just means just opportunities, as you all know, as individual parcels become available. In the Rosemont community, we have 2 units. If you go to the next slide, please. They're virtually identical that we have sold, again, under the land trust model for first-time home buyers. West Ashley, so not just Rosemont, but West Ashley as well. Again, recognizing historic preservation and trying to make sure that not only we're achieving affordability, but that the products that we're putting on the ground respect the fabric of the neighborhood and communities in which they're in, so that they fit in as part of that. Just another scattered site opportunity that we may or may not actually have to bring forth, but I will say from a planning perspective, one of the challenges here is minimum lot sizes of what the neighborhood would prefer to see versus from a development standpoint, what might make economic sense. That particular site would naturally fit in the private sector for units, but trying to balance and respect what the neighborhood wants will be part of that process to really figure out exactly what will end up being the end product. And you're probably good. This is the location that you all have seen previously that we brought before you, that I showed you the conceptual rendering in the opening slides. The city, working in conjunction with SCDOT, transferred this site at Fishburne and Cumming Street over to the CRC. We are in the permitting stage of creating 4 units of affordable housing there. They'll be rental units, not for sale. But I think, as we look at some of these key issues of how do we make this happen, how do we make this work, balancing existing setbacks, balancing the fabric of the existing neighborhood, balancing all those different elements, how do we still achieve the product? This one has it all. This location truly has it all as we start working through the site plan to not trigger unintended consequences, whether that's sprinkling, firewalls, that sort of thing, but still try to achieve density in terms of number of units. That's not going to be hard to read, and quite honestly, it changes every 60 days or so. But the CRC was entrusted with $20 million from the city as a potential intermediary to re-land into affordable housing multifamily projects. We have 1 that has been completed. We have 3 that are currently under construction, but we have issued loan commitments of $17.5 million in support of 500 units of rental apartments. So we just had the ribbon cutting for Bulls Creek here recently, and again, you saw some of the coverage of Archer being groundbreaking for that project. Again, that list continues to evolve, but I did want to at least give some visual quantification to the loan production that the redevelopment corporation is currently doing. So what does that look like? I showed the opening map that sort of showed the dots spread across, but zeroing in on the peninsula, you'll see 4 of those units that we just mentioned, 2 of which Archer School and James Lewis Apartments under construction, and 2 others that are currently in the financing stage. And then on the next slide, West Ashley, the Bull Creek, and the 1 renovation project. So not all as new construction, some as renovation. We'll certainly provide those and take those slides to you if you will look at them a little bit closer. So I left this slide in to have a conversation just real briefly about affordability. When we have neighborhood meetings and we start having a conversation about affordable housing, the issue of what does it mean to be affordable, who are you targeting, always becomes a part of the conversation. Can I afford to live there? Okay. Can we deliver those houses at X price? So what this chart does is provides an opportunity to look at a mixture of income thresholds. If a family that makes $45,000 to $64,000 a year, based on typical mortgage components, what kind of mortgage would that person be able to afford? And in this case, looking at a potential sales price for these townhouses of $270,000, what type of subsidy does it take to put into those units to make them affordable? So obviously, as the incomes rise, the amount of subsidy that has to go into that then decreases. So someone at 120% of median income might not need the $10,000 worth of assistance to purchase one of those homes, but someone at 80% of median income might need $80,000 worth of assistance, just assuming on those families. So when we approach our elected officials and boards like you start having a conversation about affordable housing and how much subsidy we're going to put into a unit, this allows us to directly correlate that in terms of who we're serving. So if we want to serve someone lower than 80% of the median income, then we're talking about probably having to put in $100,000 a unit, which in some folks' camp may be seen as does not make sense and is not considered achieving a public purpose. But then someone else may say, well, you're not really serving someone who may be in deeper need. So that kind of chart gives you a little bit of perspective of what it takes to deliver those units, at least on homeownership. But we can do the same thing on the rental side. But I think that helps to quantify for community meetings to understand the struggle and the balance of affordability. And then I'll just, open for conversation at the end as I kind of reference the Common Cause program that I referenced earlier. Certainly when we talk about preservation of existing apartments, that's a key piece of what we do. Lending to create new units is a key piece of what we do. Developing new product is a key piece of what we do. But for our existing homeowners, our existing seniors that have their homes but may not necessarily have the means to continue to maintain them, how do we help them preserve the exterior of their homes? Roof, windows, siding, keeping those units tight. We have worked out a program to provide up to $60,000 to provide those type of repairs for homeowners that they can apply and get assistance to do stabilization work for the homes. We just this week closed our first 3 under this program. It's new. We're still learning as we're putting it in place, but we're certainly proud of the fact that we've closed the first 3 of those will be under construction too. So trying to serve every segment of the market as possible that we can touch, from rental, homeownership, and then keeping existing homeowners in their home. That's really, that's really a good summary of the work of what the CRC is doing. I think, I would just emphasize with you that from a lending standpoint, we've touched over 500 units of affordable housing. In the land trust, we have close to 200 units that are in the pipeline, and we've preserved another 84 units of existing units as affordable. Decent track record. Yeah. And we certainly appreciate your assistance in that, and certainly as we continue to move forward on these, your input certainly becomes key as we look to figure out how to structure and put these transactions together.
Thank you. I tell you, you hit it right on the head when you said affordable, because that's a word that confuses a lot of people. It's a very ambiguous word, but I think about the people and you doing stuff in other areas, but I think about the city of Charleston, the police, but the school teachers who can't afford to live in the city of Charleston, things like that, and make a good, decent living, I think. But again, housing is just a problem in Charleston anyway. But I appreciate the work you're doing, and my big focus, I think our focus is, if you think of ideas that we can do in terms of zoning that other areas are doing to help with the affordable aspect, this young lady has helped us as well, we really are interested in that, because this commission is really trying to focus on affordable housing, see what we can do to improve the situation, to get more units out there in the city of Charleston. So I was going to ask other commission members to have comments, questions, and then I was going to ask the public as well.
I know that y'all have focused a lot on the I guess 60 or below, or between that 120 and 60 range. And I think one of the things that we've also been talking about is this concept of the naturally occurring affordable housing, and I guess what's also considered to be the missing middle housing. And so it's just, where you're a touch above 120%, but you're still not in that range of being able to, truly live downtown or in that range. And so I didn't know if there were some things that we need to start looking at in terms of our zoning, or how we can approach like using the affordable housing. I think it's I can't remember. As an example, there was an ordinance that was proposed about rentals in the city, and I was thinking that would have been a great opportunity to identify people who had missing middle and naturally occurring affordable housing for people who are in that area that are just above the 120, or can't necessarily get into one of the products that are available now. And so I didn't know if there was something that we could do to help with that process.
Well, first, let me compliment you as commission and the city as a whole in terms of having done the homework and getting the tools in the toolbox for housing developers like the Free Government Corporation. So I'm applauding and awareness, and that's first, because there are those tools, but most of them are pretty prescriptive. There's a hard line, and either you meet or you don't. There are some parameters where, if it's 10% affordable or what have you, that you can, there's parking or some other type of comments. I will think about your question and see if there's anything further that makes sense in terms of recommendations bring forward. I would say I also tend to be aware of just some of those just above the threshold, but also those that are just within the threshold, because sometimes when I look at some of the files, particularly on the ownership side, that it's like, if this person so much has one single car repair that's really low, any major life event that the margins are thin, and they really could be in trouble. And so, and us being relatively new in some of our homeownership activities, nobody wants to foreclose or do any of those type of things. So I look at both sides of that threshold as real tender issue. But you are right. There are sometimes where you want some leeway. And we're kind of having a little bit of that conversation with Maria Point, because 10 of those units are going to be market rate. There are 30 that will be 120, but there are 10 units that will be market rate. And to the extent that a project like that is largely affordable, are there some other concessions that we could benefit from? I would certainly keep that in mind. I mean, for me, and this is not so much as a planning commission item as it is an approval process, is, to me, the biggest is all of the site requirements. I mean, whether it's stormwater, whether it's, those items that if you were doing a market rate project, you could afford to pay for it, but when you're doing an affordable project, it's like, can we get a little bit of relief on that?
You mean
Right.
like
the
the calculations?
Yes, calculations, that part of the process.
Any other commission members' questions? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Jacobs.
I'm going to probably reiterate a lot of things that Erica Harrelson said. I want to thank you for coming. We're getting ready to go into a zoning code rewrite, and during our city plan, we got a real education on our affordable housing situation in the city. And we sort of committed ourselves to learning and also to doing everything we can to assist. If we see a problem, let's get on top of it, try to help in some way or another. And what just having you here today is part of that process to begin to learn what you do, where you see the problems, and then as we move forward in this process, where we can all work together, and all our boots on the ground and kind of say, you know, if we tweak it this way, we might can make it work that way. And what I heard is you have a lot of tools in your toolbox that you're using now, and it doesn't hurt to get more if you can find them. And what I've been spending some time watching videos and other things from other municipalities that have gone into zoning code rewrites. And most of what they talk about is affordable housing. That's their big crisis. And most of what they say is there isn't a silver bullet. They're just making sure that we really universally understand it and we get all as many tools in our toolbox, depending on what we're looking at, to help. So I really appreciate the groundwork that y'all have laid, because y'all have laid such great groundwork. You're being quite successful. And I think as we move into this next phase, we can provide some assistance to even escalate on the groundwork.
Thank you, Ms. Sager.
And I would like very much to have access to your program, by sharing it with the city and then with us, so I can.
Other commission members and questions, comments? Mr. Bailey, you bring.
I would say the same thing that my fellow commissioners said. I just want to applaud you for a comment you made on one of the slides. I think it was in Maryville where you talked about how you're trying to develop something that's works with the neighborhood too. And you know, I know you're turning every nickel over twice just to make the project work, but being respectful of the neighborhood, surrounding neighborhood is to be applauded as well.
Thank you. Does anyone in the, if anyone has a question? Yes, sir. You go ahead and tell us who you are as well for the record.
I'll do that. My name is Rob Leahy, Mississippi, and I know you're just in the planning stage of this, Mr. Johnson, but again, thank you for your work and thank you for coming. Echo what they said. We live at the corner of Fishburne and Cumming. The opposite corner of the site, you said you have some unintended consequences. And I can just want to, I know you're still planning it, but we wouldn't want to be one of those unintended consequences, because that neighborhood, Mr. Bailey's point, it's a changing neighborhood, and that SDOT easement was given to you to do what you're doing. But a couple specific questions: why are you leaning toward rental when homeownership seems to be the charter? And separately, 4 units on that particular piece of property, which is extremely small, seems to be a little bit too much, certainly for the parking, the off-street parking right there, but you can't park on Cumming Street. So these are, my concerns, our concerns.
I appreciate that. And we will certainly reach back out as we move forward with neighborhood group, neighborhood organization, and those surrounding to engage in conversation. It is very much, and I just showed the Google site on this concept. I did not show the current version, but we have gone back, I think, with city staff on 5 drafts of a conceptual site plan. And the key piece of that is parking. And the key piece of that is also maintaining 10-foot separation between the 2 buildings, and then staying off of the storm drain. So part of that particular site has all of the water flow compliance. It has water flow that comes as part of being adjacent to a major thoroughfare.
To say the least.
Yes. And so it has been very interesting. But to answer your question in terms of rental versus homeownership, I think just it was the thought in that location that rental seemed to be the most appropriate approach. But I think that the concerns from the surrounding neighborhood is understanding that by keeping it in the land trust, that you have a public partner that is very concerned about making sure that maintenance and appearance and those types of things are very much forefront of something that is helps alleviate that those 4 units are most likely going to end up in 1-bedroom units. So it won't be what I'm gonna say family units. Which I think will also help as it relates to the parking issue. But so, I appreciate you raising the subject. We certainly have no problem staying engaged in the conversation and welcome the feedback. But just to clear, yes, right now I'm actually waiting for architects internal. We've identified what the site looks like, but now in terms of internally, what does the units look like, and then what is the exterior architecture? When we get into exterior architecture and elevations, we'll certainly reach back out to you.
I appreciate that very much. You have my information.
Yeah, you'll have each other's contacts, so that's good. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Arthur Lawrence, near Jackson, community, and I just do everything with you alluded to about that particular spot on Fishburne and coming. You have to be unique, and it's going to be a family-owned, single family, but we have a problem with people coming in and double stacking those apartments and causing problems with parking in the community. So we have to look at that area real close, make sure that it don't change the fabric of that community on those designs. And I hope that y'all show that design to the association of that area.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Leahy, you have a good ally over there. You spoke out like that. Is there any other questions, Mr. Bevins? Is anybody else? Go ahead. Thank you, and we want to thank you again for coming. Again, any other ideas? Ms. Johnson is very good. You know, we really want to help tackle this affordable housing problem. Ideas of things with zoning, staff can help in trying to rework some things. We greatly appreciate it. We're all in this together, so thank you. Thank you all for coming too. Appreciate it. Thank you. Christopher, y'all tell me if y'all want to wait a minute for the regular meeting. Still got I guess we got a minute or so. We'll wait 1 minute and we'll start at 5 o'clock meeting.
I think Harry pulled up right behind.
Oh, great. He told me he'd be here.
Yeah, I tried.
No, I know.
Sorry.
Back into hell.
What's going on lately?
Yeah, it's everywhere. I was in Mount Pleasant yesterday. At 3 o'clock I was packed up.
It's so bad. That Wonder Bridge is just every day.
How are you, sir? I want to see you. Yeah, everything good? Yeah. Yeah, a little presentation. We'll get it to you too. All right, I would like to see it. Thank you. Morgan, if you're ready, is he ready with that? Okay, you tell me when and we'll get started.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the September 21st meeting of the City of Charleston Planning Commission. My name is Charlie Harris. I'm the chairman. I'm joined by Mr. Harold Singh, Vice Chairman, Mr. Jimmy Daly, Mr. Jonathan Jacobs, Sarah Harrison, Brian Jenkins, Ms. Johnson is with us. I'm sorry, I drew a blank. I did want to note that McKenna Joyce was going to be here. You see her name up there. She's not here. She has a good excuse. She just had a baby, and that's good. I think the name of the baby is Jack. And so, yeah, so hopefully he'll be able to meet Jack eventually. So she's got a good valid excuses. We all, you know, but we are. So you know, the commission members are volunteers and appointed by Charleston City Council. So I know you join me in thanking them for their efforts to try to make this even a better city as it always is. The way we'll run this meeting is I'll introduce an item, read an item into the agenda from the agenda. And Mr. Morgan, staff will give us a presentation and tell us whether they recommend something. Then we'll ask the applicant to come forward and give a presentation. Then we'll ask anyone who's supporting the application to speak. Anyone opposed to the application, and after that, we'll ask the applicant if you'd like to address any issues that were brought up by the people in opposition. There is, there's a, after we close, then we close the public aspect of the meeting. And there's sometimes people want to get a word in, and we really can't. Once we close the public aspect, we ask you to consider that and know that we can't go back and forth. So we really accommodate that. I'd ask if anyone has a cell phone to please put it on silent or shut it off. And if you speak tonight, we'd ask you to come forward and to tell us who you are and where you live and if you're representing anyone. I'd also like Mr. Morgan to introduce any staff that will be presenting tonight, and also tell us if there's, I think there was one to change to the agenda. If you'd let us know, that'd be great.
Yeah, start off, there is a deferral. It's 179 and 181 Fishburne Street.
Reconsideration.
That item has been deferred by the applicant, so it will not be heard tonight. I am Christopher Morgan, Planning Manager at the city. To my right is Jim Hemphill, planner, who is our chief planning commission planner. Also, Philip Rivercash is here. He helps us out with these meetings. Philip Slacker is our clerk. Lee Batchelder is our zoning administrator, and will be here for questions. And Anna Hart is our senior zoning planner as well.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. That being said, we'll go ahead and get started. The first item on the agenda was the, we got some minutes, but I think we'll take those at the end so we get the meeting going, if that's okay with the commission members. Rezoning consideration is the first item. But we'll go to the second item on the agenda, which is. I think we moved.
Yeah.
Mr.
fellow commissioners, I'd like to move that we consider the ordinance amendment before we consider the rezoning. So move the last, one of the last items up to the beginning of the agenda.
For information, I think that gives us a little bit more info.
Exactly.
Wait, is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Ms. Johnson, anyone have any questions on that?
My only question was, the actual amendment was never part of this agenda. So there we have not had this, provided this amendment was not included in our packet. So I'm sure we can see it tonight.
I think it's not in the initial package.
Yeah, but it was in afterwards. Yeah, it was afterwards.
I didn't see it either.
Oh, really? Well, it's on,
Maybe.
but it's on the meeting agenda, so I think we need.
Well, it's on the agenda. I'm sorry, the whole text of the ordinance is not in the packet for us to read.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
You have a concern with moving that
There's
forward?
one-page amendments right in front of you there, it's very short.
Okay.
I might suggest we hear the.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Hear it?
Yes. So there's a motion by Mr. Hussein, second by Mr. Bailey, to move that item up to the first item on the agenda. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Wait, Mr. Morgan will do the order. Who's going to present this ordinance amendment?
Sure, I'll start off on
Okay.
this and let Mr. Batchelder add anything.
Let me just read it into the record.
Okay.
To amend Article 3, Part 2, Old City Height District and View Corridor Protection, Section 54-306A, Height District 2.5, Chapter 54 of the Code of the City of Charleston zoning ordinance to allow more flexibility for height in principal buildings within a VA or 8U flood zone. Yes, sir.
Okay. So this ordinance was put together based on the planning commission's comments from a couple of meetings ago when you all were considering several different rezonings in the west side area that had height amendments. Because I think the sentiment we got from the commission was that there was concern about where you've got lower lying areas, can there be some conditions that encourage the use of that elevated area that has to be created because of the FEMA regulations and the city's freeboard requirements? Is there a way to make better use of that elevated area? Because typically, the way our codes read at present, if you have 6 feet or greater under your house and you use that, that is then considered a story if it's used as garage space, things like that. And that would cut into the 2.5 story height district that was in this area. So this ordinance essentially allows for new principal buildings within the VE and AE zone, which most of this area is in, on the flood insurance rate map, to have 2 stories over a first floor structure that exceeds 6 feet in height, provided the first floor elevation does not exceed the elevation required to meet FEMA and city free board requirements. So for example, we were looking at a lot of properties that were in the AE12 zone. So that's a flood zone that requires, the federal aspect of the flood zone requires you to go to 12 feet, but the city adds 2 feet on top of that. So that means the door threshold for a new structure has to be at 14 feet above grade, above sea level, excuse me. A lot of the areas we're dealing with over there are ranging between 4.5 to 6 or 7 feet in height. So let's say you've got a 6-foot property elevation. What that allows you to do is your building has to be up at 14. You have a foot or so of structural area, and that is debatable, but it depends on how you design it. It is possible to fit a foot of floor to be your floor system. So then that takes you from 14 down to 13, and that difference between 13 and 6 feet, that 7-foot zone, could be used for a garage area, and it wouldn't penalize you from the standpoint of counting as a full story. And you would still be able to have 2 stories over that. In this situation, in the 2.5-story height district.
Any questions, commission members? Anyone else from staff want to speak on this, or is it you doing a question? That's fine.
And I guess what I should say is, it's not a perfect situation. It's not going to fix every single situation there.
Yeah.
It's going to have garages that might not be as tall as some conventional garages, but it lets you make better use of that space under the house because you're elevating for the FEMA and the freeboard requirements.
Thank you. Questions, commission members? If not, since the city really is the applicant on this, we'll ask if anyone would like to speak in favor. Miss, yes, ma'am.
So because it's for the 2.5 height zone, that's just more than just west side. That would encompass how many other?
Yeah, anywhere there's 2.5, and I think I've got a map back in here back with the 2.5 is in a good bit of area around the city.
I think it says old city district.
Which means anywhere that has the 2.5 height district, which is all the west side. Yeah. So the area in yellow on this map is the 2.5-story height district. So what you get is the west side, which is in here, a good bit of Hampton Park Terrace, all of Wagner Terrace. You get most of North Central, if not all of North Central, and then a little bit of south of Broad down here off of Murray Boulevard.
And the other is the one on the other, right on the other side of the I-26.
Yeah, just limited areas over here on the other side of I-26. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then we also compared that with where we've got FEMA 100-year floodplain, which, the west side is almost completely, or most of the west side over here, west of Rutledge, it's almost completely in the 100-year floodplain. And so again, obviously we're dealing with lower elevation further up the land. And then this is just the 2.5 overlaid with that. So you see that, it would have the greatest applicability in areas like this or in some of the lower areas in Wagner Terrace, for example.
Yeah.
Is there a limit? And forgive me, you might have addressed this already, but the differential, so saying AE and BE zones is, I think, accurate, but say there's an area that has a curb elevation of 8 feet there.
Right.
Would they still have the ability then to
They would have the
under-
difference between that 8-foot elevation and the 14,
Right.
and then they do the structural system maybe down to 13 or
so
something.
it is limited. You're not
yeah,
going to have some
that
extra
is
tall
correct.
structures.
Yeah. If it's, when you start to get up in the 8-foot zones, there's probably not as much you can do with that space.
And is there any relief if it's something like, if it's 6 feet, for example, which would be challenging to use as a garage? So when you're capping it at if it's maybe 13, for example, and it's 8 feet or 9 or so, is there? You mentioned that some of the garages may be shorter than normal. Is there any relief for that, or what? What's that
Not
gonna
through
look like?
this ordinance, I mean, you would have to meet whatever building code there is. I think there probably are a lot of houses that get built that don't call the space under the house a garage. They have a garage door and have a concrete floor. And then once it's built, people do park smaller vehicles under there, that kind of thing.
Which I think is great.
But-
I just like the idea in terms of getting cars off of the street, if there is
Right,
that
and there
ability.
still will be that requirement that you get cars off the street.
Sure.
That you still have to provide the parking on the site as per the city's codes per number of residential units.
Ms. Jenkins, go
I
ahead.
do have one question that brought to my mind. once we make the calculation, and then they put their 2.5 stories above that, what I haven't heard is, what is the height of the story? we talk numbers. So is there a height limit?
I think that's what we were trying to
And I
get
think
away
if you
from,
dig
right?
deep in the height regs, there is one, I don't know, Lee, do you know what that is the limit?
I thought it was going to the
12
right
feet
of
or
way.
something? 11 or 12 feet, it's pretty generous
That's what
for
that's what
the
I was-
ceiling height,
that's what
yeah.
I've heard before in previous
Right.
conversations,
But-
so you're talking about a height of ceiling, you're not getting 2.5 stories and using you're building these 8-foot ceiling homes. when people
Right.
really want to.
And part of the reason in our new height regs that we adopted in 2017 was to get back to that kind of traditional Charleston feel in structures where there were greater floor to ceiling heights and not penalize structures for that.
Well, and also people that have concerns where they're gonna get the 2.5 story over these FEMA requirements and freeboard requirements. You don't want to have these ultra tall structures because a story is also 13 feet. That's what this is.
And there is actually a cap. I thought we kind of had done away with this. There is a 12-foot limit.
I don't know that we've had anything run into that of late, maybe some super high-end houses somewhere or something, but
But
yeah.
is that also measured against the size of the right of way in certain parts of the city? Well, maybe it might be in different areas.
I think
where
maybe in that 2.5, 3.5 zone,
That's a story.
yeah.
Height
That- Yeah, the
overall.
Mr. Bailey, go ahead.
Just to clarify, does this amendment say 2 stories
It does say 2 stories over that storage
over
area.
that?
Because
If you make the exception, then you get, or if you utilize the provision here, you get 2 stories, not 2.5.
But the thing to remember is essentially, let's say you've got, 7 feet of space in that first level. What you've essentially got is what we would call right now a 3-story structure, the garage area and then 2 stories over that. So you're getting a little bit more space by virtue of that. It's not, perfect, but it's keeping us within, the character of the district that was created for this area for a very important purpose.
I
and that was-
personally think that's good. I just
Yeah.
wanted to clarify, because I think I heard Ms. Jacobs say 2.5.
Well,
Yeah,
it'll
so
stay,
it's
it'll
two
stay
above the
2.5.
parking area,
They
yeah.
don't do the.
Or it could be 2.5 if they're just doing the standard, elevation and don't want to utilize that area, then it's 2.5.
And another question, this ordinance has not been before city council.
Correct.
So this is just coming to us for information or what?
Well,
No, we're acting on it.
Yes.
So any other questions, commission members? If not, would anyone from the public like to speak in favor of this ordinance amendment? Yes, sir, go ahead and tell us who you are and.
Hi, I'm Sam Spence from the Preservation Society. The Preservation Society supports this amendment to the 2.5-story height district to allow more flexibility for height and high flood zones. This change has created more predictability for new development in historic neighborhoods by reducing the number of requests to make those piecemeal zoning changes to the zoning map. New construction should respond to existing context while meeting elevation requirements, and we feel this amendment makes that pathway clear.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Anyone else like to speak in favor? Yes, ma'am. You come on up. Mr. Olay, we know you would tell us who you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cashin Drolay with Historic Charleston Foundation, 40 East Bay Street. Speaking in support of the proposed ordinance amendment, no doubt that floodplain site elevations present challenges. I think the ordinance before you provides a really good common ground solution that provides some flexibility while also avoiding piecemeal changes, provides a wholesale solution, and also respects the historic character of the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Olay. Anyone else like to speak in favor of this? If not, anyone like to speak in opposition to this? Yes, sir. Come on up.
So, Mr. Chairman, my name is Todd Richardson. I'm a landscape architect and land planner with Synchronicity. Got a supplemental information packet for you all.
I'm putting you to work here.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's all right. Thank you, sir. Morgan, you have this. Can you get one? Yeah, thank you.
I have an extra copy.
Thank you. Mr. Richardson, you go ahead.
Thank you very much. So, there are actually a lot of problems with this proposal. We are licensed architects and landscape architects who do projects in the city every day. We have a site which is used as an example of why this is not a good solution and why the existing zoning ordinance provision should remain in place for sites just like ours. So there's a bit of professional discrepancies with some of the things that have been presented tonight with staff as to how the building codes actually work. So one thing that we cannot do is promote people to access and occupy spaces that do not meet the international building code. There is a minimum clearance area for a garage, is 6 feet 8 inches. So the project that I have before you tonight is now agenda item number 1 because agenda item number 1 was deferred. So we have a site that is it's a combination of properties at Ashley Avenue and Ward's Court. The topographic elevations get below 4 feet. We are an AE10 flood zone. Because we're AE, your measurement goes to your finished floor. It is not the lowest part of your structure, which is the BE zone, which is different. So with the city's +2, that puts us with a total of 12 feet when you add on to that. That's not possible in that clearance area. You have 6 feet. If you have an average, that's not possible to have a garage below. So the negative impact of what this creates is effectively a parking lot. And so the exhibits before you, so I have a cover letter which describes why these are issues, all from building code standpoints, as well as FEMA and ADA, FHA, all the codes that we have to follow as licensed professionals in performing permit construction documents to build in the city of Charleston. So the first page that I have is our site plan with our concept. So where we are, story heights, it's 2.5 stories. The maximum building height is 40 feet. That is dictated by the right-of-way on which we present. In applying for the up zone, which is the next height story category, that is a 3-story. That is also capped at 40 feet. So there's no maximum building height that is going to be required or proposed in this application. So if you go to the second exhibit, what we have here is the site categorized by building coverage, open space, and hardscape. On the bottom is our proposed site plan. So we have 10 small homes on this property, where the average square footage is 1,200 square feet. Most of these homes have cars that are parked under in garages that comply with the 3-story height up zone. On the top is if you are disallowed to do that. All those cars that are under home have to go up on the site. You can see it's basically data. We calculated what this would do. It would increase site coverage from hardscape. It would make meeting our stormwater requirements much more difficult in TRC. And the West Side neighborhood would be presented with a project that effectively is a parking lot. And we, with several members of the West Side over the last few months, the last thing they want to see is a parking lot. We have astounding support to have garages to get cars off of the street, first of all. We also include guest parking, which this proposal would eliminate our guest parking. So we get cars off the street, we get them underfoot of house, we meet all code requirements in the building code, we have less site impact, and we have better stormwater outcomes. So the next exhibit that you have is a comparison, because a lot of people still aren't quite sure what a half-story is. So this exhibit shows what a 2.5-story plan would be on the bottom and what a 3-story plan would be. All you're doing on that 3rd story plate is you're building out, not up. So you're able to utilize the entire footprint. Again, these are modest homes. We're talking about 2 bedrooms and 2.5 with the proposal. If that is limited, and you only have 1.5 stories above, then you have 1 bedroom and 1 bath. 1 bedroom and 1.5 bath, excuse me. The next exhibit is an elevation comparison. So you can see in front of you what a 2.5-story home is versus what a 3-story home is on this proposed project in real time. The height maximum is not exceeded in either. It's still capped at 40 feet. So, what we have here is, it's an attempt to fix something which is already fixed in the code. You all, as the planning commission body, have this mechanism which you vote on, which we have brought 2 proposals to you before, with unanimous support from staff, commission, and city council. Because in those situations, both where we had topographies of 4 feet, it was the right thing to do. So these are all driven by flood dynamics. What we don't want to do is put someone up against a ceiling, which we can't have logical program below. So what you have to happen if this were to go through is you would have people who were either clearing and grading their entire site to park cars, or you would have people commit code violations by creating unsafe spaces under their houses, by utilizing spaces which you cannot do, which none of us can support, or you would have people dig out and try to create that depth, which would violate the stormwater code and create flood problems underfoot of the house. So you'll hear from us later in our presentation, but there's a reason why this mechanism was put in by the previous planning director, why it was reviewed extensively and approved. And it is only used in certain circumstances, and it is driven by flood issues. So these flood issues aren't going to go away. They're going to get worse. So we have to be very responsible. In our proposed total site solution, we're dealing with the stormwater issue that will cost in excess of $200,000 on top of all project and building costs, because it's the right thing to do. The 4 properties that we are assembling are higher at Horsford and Ashley Avenue, but they're the lowest point on that entire block. And they go back and they fill and they flood. And they flood beyond the perimeter of our properties. So we're coming in to provide a better neighborhood solution from an engineering side and from an aesthetic side. We're putting in homes that are modest, that are the most affordable and attainable that we can produce for the city. So when you look at this, it's not an isolated thing. There are so many factors that affect these decisions. So if you consider something like this, you have to understand that as architects and landscape architects, we have to adhere to all the codes beyond zoning. And it can be reckless if you make a change like this at zoning without fully acknowledging or understanding the built implications beyond. And the last thing we want are code violations or things that are unsafe. So we don't have a lot of properties left in this district where we have to deal with this, but we have to deal with it. We have to face the issue, utilize the mechanism that's in the zoning ordinance, and be responsible as both practitioners and appointed and elected officials. So I'll be happy to answer any technical questions that you have with this, along with the narrative that I provide.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Thank you.
I guess I have one question. So even though I know this is your application for your particular site.
This is Z, and we're talking about the ordinance.
Right. It's an example.
Exactly. So I guess one question is that if we were to recommend approving this particular change and just having heard like what Mr. Johnson was talking about, the process, like how does that affect other projects in terms of the efficiency of 2.5 stories or what would be arguably a site that could possibly have affordable housing or anything of that nature? How does that affect the overall? How does a change like this affect the overall?
It could kill a project. It could create so many code violations down the road that it would be unbuildable, and we would get more of a project blight than what we currently have. So, and that's especially when you do affordable housing projects, those are held to even more board reviews and standards. And the last thing you would want to subject folks to who are in that position are worse conditions. The whole goal is to not have a Section 8 scenario from decades ago, where let's put people over here and they can just deal with what we give them. That's not a responsible human choice that we have to make.
I want to challenge that because I don't think that this is forcing anyone to utilize this tool. It's just presenting another option. Correct?
No, it's not. So it would hinder the ability on our site, which is again real data, to utilize under the first living flood the ability to do garages.
I don't have the proposed language in front of me, but my read of it is that it just provides
Right, we'll
another
let staff
tool.
answer at the end of that, after people have input, so.
So it does, and it caps it. So they would cap us at, so we would have 6 feet as a base. It would cap us at 12.
Okay.
A minimum garage height by code is 6 feet 8 inches. When you add mechanicals like doors, that goes up to 8 feet before you even put your structure in, which then on top of that, because again, we're in an AE zone, would be 2 feet higher than that. So then we have a delta of about 3.5 feet where we're beyond that line, that short ceiling that they've now set.
Again, if we have a question, let's kind of direct it towards, I hate that it's tough to do against an ordinance amendment versus a note versus this project.
Well, I have an ordinance amendment question
Okay.
that I actually think you may be able to answer better. And this really was my question. I just didn't phrase it well. But with the garage space, to then create this unusable space underneath, would it provide any sort of relief by regulating? I mean, you said 6 to 8. I thought a garage needs to be, I thought it was 8. But by regulating what, if you utilize that space, if you're in an 8-year BE zone, if you utilize that space as a garage, would it provide relief that it has to be a minimum of the 8 feet or the 6 to 8 that's needed, or
No, because that puts you right in conflict with the International Building Code, which rules all. So you would basically have glorified crawl spaces that you could not occupy as a garage.
No, I'm saying that if you were to utilize this, and the ordinance then said that if you utilize it, the space underneath as a garage space, it has to be a minimum of whatever, I thought it was 8 feet or whatever that International Building Code is.
It's 8 feet with mechanicals, but you can't do that where you're capped at the first floor elevation height that is in the proposal.
Correct. I'm just thinking of a way where that can be regulated, where you don't end up with these, random spaces underneath that aren't usable, or where you've got people trying to park small cars, or it is an unsafe condition.
The answer is simple, is to not change it, because you already have the mechanism in place to provide code compliant spaces. But for some reason, there's a perception that you don't have that mechanism, but you do. And our application is a clear sign of that, as something that you vote on as this appointed body for just such reasons.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak in opposition to this ordinance amendment? That being the case, thank you. I'm going to close the public aspect, but I'd like staff, since there was concerns, I'd like staff to address the concerns for commission members.
And I think as Mr. Richardson, he had shared with us these same documents. He met with Lee and myself a few weeks ago and shared these with us. And, I think there's a lot of good information there, but, this ordinance amendment is not something that's going to fix every single situation. But we heard the commission say you all wanted us to do something. It was the most that we felt like we could do, because we feel very, very strongly that areas like the west side that were set with 2.5-story height districts, they're going to set a very unfortunate precedent if we do rezonings of parcel by parcel for bigger houses. The site plans that Mr. Richardson's showing, all very nice and all, but there's nothing that guarantees that site plan gets built. The property could flip in a week. And every single site that is developed in the city has to adhere to our stormwater regulations. So they have to deal with the stormwater, whether, when they're building these developments.
Was there any consideration, as you discussed this ordinance amendment, to just doing away with that half story? As we've looked at.
It's very traditional in Charleston to have the half stories.
Sure.
And neighborhoods like the west side have lots of houses with the half stories and all. So,
Correct, and I
yeah.
have no issue with that, but if we're looking at this from a height perspective, there can be no difference between, or they can be fairly equal with a 2.5 and a 3-story. I mean, a 2.5 and a 3-story, because it's massing.
Yeah.
So was there any consideration, was there any conversation about that?
Because we had Lonnie Plater Zeiger, architects come in and at great expense.
Oh, I remember.
Working with the preservation organizations and the community architects, things like that, to develop the height districts we had based on the character of buildings and development in Charleston. All the streets in the city.
So I understand that. I just think it's a little misleading when we're talking height districts, but then the 2.5 isn't height, it's massing. And that's why I'm just wondering if there was a conversation had there, which would provide some relief.
And in other things that have been discussed about possible amendments with the height regulations and all, it's never been the half stories. We haven't heard from architects, we haven't heard from neighborhoods, from preservation groups, anything like that.
Any other questions from Mr. Morgan on this? Members, clarification? If not, again, we've closed the aspect commission members, discussion, questions, motions.
So my discussion is that I feel like we don't have enough information right now. If there are practical building, we don't have Gordon anymore. For somebody to go, this was very helpful to go through code and best practices in building, and I don't feel like I have enough information to vote on this today.
Other commission members? Lane, I'm gonna pick on you.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking, and actually, Jim just brought around a copy of the ordinance, which, except for seeing it on the screen, most of it's hadn't had a chance to see before the meeting. So, just because of that, I think I might just move to defer this, and we can study and think, I'm curious about the question that was made, or the statement that was made earlier about this, the garage space or the ground floor space being not up to the building code if these are, and not occupiable because of that.
Well, you can't build a structure if it doesn't meet building code. So you've got to have all.
I guess not occupiable is the.
It could be that depending on what your elevation that you're building at, that space there, while you might have access to it, it's not occupiable.
Got it.
From a
Okay.
garage standpoint.
Got it.
That is correct. Yes.
And I'm gonna join Mr. Lassane, and I'll second this motion. I guess that's a motion to defer it.
Yes.
I appreciate that. I think they've tried to do what we asked them to do, and I appreciate that, and I think they've accomplished a lot. But again, I think, as Ms. Johnson said, it's pretty technical, and I just want to make sure we're doing it right, 100% right. We all have a chance to digest it a little bit. Mr. Bailey, you have anything? You look like you were saying something, so I don't want to cut you off. Okay. Anybody else? There's a motion to defer by Mr. Lassane. I second it. If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. So now we're going to come, I think we're going to see Mr. Richardson again, I believe. So now we're going to come, the next item on the agenda is zoning, which is number 1. 313 Ashley Avenue, West Side. Mr. Warren, I think you said we can take a few together, correct?
I think we can. The sequencing we're going to go through is so there are some different aspects. There's some different surroundings, things like that. When you look at this grouping of properties, 313 Ashley and the Orrs Court and things like that. Particularly the Orrs Court, being on such a narrow street, and the character of the housing that's around it on the Orrs Court is a little bit different.
So you want to take this one on its own?
Well, I can present all the information we have here kind of together, and then we can,
Okay, well, let's take number 1, 313 Ashley Avenue, West Side Peninsula, TMS number 46007, 0253, approximately 4.13 acres of Westfield, 2.5-story old city district, 3-story old city height district. It's more back to you.
So the property in question then, of course, is the 313 is right here in Ashley, where the cursor is. And then the other parcels are over here on Orrs Court. And this is the kind of mid-block and a larger block that has a lot of older homes in it. We will kind of show where this is in relation to the other, the surrounding 2.5-story height district. So, and again, just these because these are not on the agenda today, but this is where it is. Everything else in all directions is the 2.5 stories. So it's kind of an unprecedented mid-block change here for these parcels. In our city plan, we have this as neighborhood, which is, again, keeping the character of the traditional neighborhood in that area. It has mixed uses and things like that. Anson Borough and Bar Terrace are examples of those. Here are the aerials of the properties. Again, the Ashley Avenue property here and the Orrs Court properties here. a very, very important aspect, and we have not, as a staff, emphasized this enough in the past with height rezonings, but we will in all instances going forward, is this context of the height rezonings. And this is in the height district, and it is a question you all have to answer as a commission and city council has to answer. And it says, an applicant seeking a height rezoning shall only be able to request a rezoning to the next higher height district, except for applicants seeking rezoning to upper Peninsula zoning district. Request to rezone to a higher height district shall be evaluated in part on the context of the property, the character of the immediate area, street widths around the property, and whether the requested rezoning will be compatible with surrounding properties. Our staff, in evaluating these, feels none of these questions are in the affirmative. It is out of character with the surrounding area. So the commission would need to show how it is in character with the surrounding area in the context of the motions that are made if you should choose to recommend for the height change. In the case of the Ashley Avenue situation, we do have a very large property to the right that was built before the height districts were in place. It could be viewed as almost 4 stories, it may be more, 3.5, something like that. But it was one of the kind of poster children, if you want to say, for the West Side, saying we only want 2.5 stories. We do not want big buildings like this anymore. And so when you take that out of the equation, everything around this on this side is in the 1.5 to 2.5 story districts. And I'll just kind of go around it. This is across the street. Again, 2-story houses across the street. Again, you see 1 and 2, 2.5 stories further up the street once you get past the newer big house. And this is directly across the street. Also, 1-story houses. You know, the West Side is very heavily populated with 1-story houses. I would hazard a guess that it's nearly half of the neighborhood is just 1-story houses. A lot of freedmen's cottages, things like that. So these are very important things to take into context when you're looking at this. And again, you know, thinking about utilization of these properties, lots of things can still be built on these properties at 2.5 story limits. It's just, you know, do we want to have more jammed in there at a 3-story? Here's some more images of the Ashley Avenue sites. 2.5 story height district that we've already discussed earlier in the day. And I'm going to kind of jump through this because we've already talked about 100-foot lane, what the elevations are in these areas. Yeah, there we go. We are at 313, which is right up here. So you can see some of the elevations from the site. It looks like they said, and this isn't final elevation info. This is just info from DNR. I guess what is the process that we use to take satellite imagery? So these are showing 6 to 7 feet. And then a low down back in here to like 5 or 6 feet, and the properties to the rear, 6 or 7. Then you have the areas in yellow that are 5 to 6, and then you have 4 to 5 towards the rear in this area. So, you know, it gets lower as you go back from the street. So our recommendation for the Ashley Avenue is for disapproval. I'm going to go ahead and just jump through. And
Yeah, let's do that because I will read the rest of them into the record if that's okay with that. We'll take them all together. I don't think you have an issue with that. So, yeah. Yeah, let me go ahead and number 2 is 0 or Court, West Side Peninsula, TMS number 46007, 02, 071.07 acres, request zoning 2.5 story height district to 3-story city height district. Number 3 on the agenda is 18 Horse Court, West Side Peninsula, TMS number 46007, 02, 070, and that's approximately 0.06 acres. Same request, 2.5 to 3. And number 4 on the agenda is 20 Orrs Court, West Side Peninsula, TMS number 46007, 02, 069, and that one's 0.13 acres. Again, 2.5 City Old City Height District, 3-story Old City Height District. Sorry.
So 0 Orrs Court is to the rear here, pre-existing lot. And then, again, you've seen this image before. We're going to zip through these. Same situation here, same aerial. Again, the same criteria about the surrounding context that needs to be stated as part of your motion. A very important thing about the Orrs Court houses is that not only are the houses that are around those even lower in scope and height than Ashley Avenue, the distance of the right of way on Moore's Court is really constrained. It's one of the narrowest streets in the city. It's only about 15 feet in width. We're going to show you a video in a few minutes that is standing in front of the site that gives you a real sense of how low the surrounding housing is. But this is the house at the front of one of the parcels here. You know, it's the parcel the house that's been renovated to the left. It's also one story. And looking further to the north, that's the one story there. This is all the way down Moore's Court. It's completely one story across the street at the school. There are 1- and 2-story houses as you go up Moore's Court in this direction. To the south immediately to the south is a 2-story structure. It's the kind of tan colored structure. And then you have what I guess would be considered today a 3-story structure. For sense of height, that fence that you see right there between these two structures is at 6 feet. So for example, this garage door that is here is about a 7-foot garage door. And I guess the structure, probably the floor level in there, is probably 9 feet above grade, something like that. And that grade is somewhere around 6 feet or something like that. So that is one that does go a little bit higher, but it is newer. It is before we had the 2.5-story houses in place, but it is a little bit higher. So again, our recommendation to Moore's Court is disapproval. Then we go to the other parcels, that is 18 Oars, again, same slides here. Again, same criteria of the character of the surrounding area. And you see the subject property there, the house on it, yellow. I'm going to stick that, and then we'll go to the final vacant lot that's on Moore's Court. Same images here, same background, same criteria of evaluation. And then here's the subject property of the final one on Moore's Court, the 20 Moore's Court. And properties to the south, the 2-story, and then the small piece we call the 3-story. Let's see. And this is going a little bit further down Moore's Court, at the end of Moore's Court at Fishburne. Again, 1-story house. The entire side of Moore's Court to the west is 1-story structures. To the east is a 1-story structure as well on this corner. And disapproval on this one. Then we have to go to a different kind of software to show you the video that we took out here. But I think it gives a little bit better sense. Hopefully it's going to work for us here. I don't know exactly.
It can be patient.
Okay, so this is looking at the property. Again, we're directly across the street from it. We're looking directly at the property here. Then you see the 2-story that's adjacent to it, the one anomaly of that blue house. Everything else is 1 or 2 stories. There's another video. It's down at Fishburne, so we have to go to that and load it. Again, everything behind me who's taking this video is 1 story. So I mean, 3 stories. I'm just saying, this is at the intersection of Fishburne and Moore's Court. You see 1 story. This may qualify as a 2-story in blue. It was recently elevated. 1 story, 2 story. One around the corner here. 2 story, 1 story. And then we're back to Moore's Court.
Christopher, could you do me a favor? Because maybe I'm the one who's totally out to lunch here.
Sure.
Could you go back to that picture of that blue house that you're calling a 3-story house, please?
Sure. That one.
You just went wrong.
Yeah, skip it.
Yeah, you did.
I wanted the view that was straight on, which I think was
Yeah,
earlier.
I think it's further back.
It is.
There.
Yeah.
So again, the
So-
subject property is to the left with the big tree on it.
Yeah.
So you got the brown house, tan house that is 2-story, and then the pre 2.5-story height limit blue house.
Could you show me with your cursor if
Mhm.
that blue house were 2.5 story,
Mhm.
how much less high it would be?
So if the garage is counted,
How tall is that? Because again, we have the 40-foot.
38.
Oh, what is that?
So no, my question is, if that were under current zoning, 2.5 stories, where would the top of that roof be?
I could not tell you that.
Exactly.
It very well may be that it would be somewhere around 38, 40 feet, something like that. But I think you would probably see a little bit of this third floor, if that is a full third floor, cut into.
Sure.
To,
Okay, but
to
it
meet the
would not,
criteria for the 2.5.
it potentially would not affect the overall height. I think I'm just getting very
Overall,
confused with the.
absolutely not, yeah.
Okay.
And again, this is about character.
Sure,
This
sure.
is character of the neighborhood.
Okay. But the height would, we're talking about being very tall, the height
Mhm.
could remain the same at 2.5 stories.
Yes, it just has more dormers and more roofs activity, which again is very common in that neighborhood, is that you have lots of roofs, lots of dormers, things like that.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Mr. Moore, thank you. And I have from Mr. Richardson, who's applicant on these items. Thank you, Mr. Richardson, for your patience.
Thank you very much. Once again, my name is Todd Richardson. I'm a landscape architect and land planner with Synchronicity. We also perform architecture, and we're providing all those services on this project. I spoke to you briefly previously about why the proposed changes that happened after our application would not be a good thing for the city. I also wanted to point out that by a point of order, we did that as concerned citizens because those changes do not affect our application because of the time. So what's before you tonight is another flood condition derived request and application. Our site ranges from 8 feet down to 3.85 feet at the rear. Because of that and where we are, we're in AE 10 flood zone. So if you were to add the city's freeboard height, which they call it freeboard height, but to the finished floor elevation would be a 12. So that's what we have to make up. In a lot of our projects downtown, whether it's west side, north side, east side, we work on projects for affordable and attainable housing. We are trying to repopulate the peninsula with young professionals and young families who are often priced out with access and affordability. We've worked with several houses on the east side, in particular where historic homes had to be elevated to be preserved due to flood conditions, and also meeting all the city's ordinances to make sure that those new structures were also meeting those flood conditions. Pile in stormwater and everything else, and you can get some complicated projects. The reason for our request tonight is that we would like to have a collection of small homes, modest homes, that will fall into an attainable price range. These homes would be proposed to be on average 2 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms. Nothing large, nothing lavish. Our request goes from a 2.5 story at a maximum of 40 feet to 3 stories, which is 2 building floors over a garage story, max at 40 feet. The reason why we are coming in as an assemblage is because we have a property that is the last to be developed on this block. Plat is so old that what is submitted in our application is handwritten, which you don't see much anymore. We are trying to come in with small homes that will, in a combined approach, deal with the stormwater measures for us. Folks can often take a path of not going to the extent and the expenses that we would, and simply try to build homes on the parcels individually. They would subvert the CRC process and avoid 95% of the stormwater measures that we have to face. So that is a concern of ours for anyone who would take this project on other than a willing developer to do it, which there aren't many left. 10 years ago, I probably had 12 developers who would do infill projects this complicated. Now I have about 2 or 3. And they're going away almost weekly because, frankly, it's very difficult to deal with. And they're going out to the greenfield, which we don't really support. So we're working with problematic projects here on a daily basis. By combining these 4 parts, we're able to come in with a total site stormwater solution and also achieve our goals that we have as a firm, which is to bring in affordable and attainable homes. So by doing that, we have a proposal in front of you, which the exhibits provided earlier are the actual proposed elevations, floor plans, and housing dynamics. We've met with the folks on the west side a lot, individually, presented at board meetings, heard concerns, and talked about why our solution, we feel, is a great solution, and our concerns that we have about proposed staff solutions that you've heard previously this evening. So our request is simply to come in, fix a drainage problem, which is a real concern, and something that's only going to get worse. You've got a mix of housing contexts around us. We don't deny that at all. But we are not building for today. We are building for tomorrow. And we have to be responsible when we face resilient urbanism challenges by coming up with smart solutions. What we're proposing are 2 living stories above a garage. Things we've discussed earlier of why we find problematic is the same program, only over a crawl space. We are simply applying to ensure that we can park the required vehicles, which are 2 per residence, by the city's parking code. It's actually 1.5, but we're going over that to make sure that we don't put extra cars onto the right of ways. We're also providing guest parking, which you're not required to do when you do these projects. But we know what folks are concerned about. We have parking plans on pretty much any project we do. You meet with folks, the number one issue here is parking. Not only the residents, but where the guests are. And so we provide that in this total site solution. So we are asking for your consideration of that so that we can deal with the property responsibly and make sure that it's something that's going to endure. What I have concerns about are some of our adjacent contextual homes, which are mostly below the flood line because they were built before the standards that we all face today. And those standards may increase even more. And going this extra mile to ensure that if we were to add another freeboard, a foot to our freeboard, we would also be able to weather that within our proposed space. So I appreciate your time. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. It can get a bit technical, I get that. But as the body that you are, it's something that you do from time to time have to deal with. So we appreciate the responsibility that you bear.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Would anyone like to speak in favor of the application? Yes, sir. Go
I would
ahead.
like to speak.
Yes, sir. Tell us who you are.
I'm Chamberlain Chestnut. I'm the developer on the project.
Thank you, Mr. Chestnut.
If you could please flip to one, or the last page, we have exhibit in yellow and green.
Second.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
If you look at the top one, this is the 2.5 story. If you look at the bottom one, this is going to be a 3-story odor. Excuse me.
2.5 bottom, 3 up.
2.5 bottom, 3 up. Gotcha.
Yep.
We are proposing 26 parking for this site. Currently, we are only required to have 20, so we're providing 6 extra guest spaces. If you notice, our open green space went from 10%, we're going to have a 25%. That's a 15% increase in our open green space for this neighborhood. So in addition to 6 extra parking spaces, we gain 15% of open green space. If you look at the map, imagine if you go to a Lowe's or a Home Depot, you see a massive parking lot. What a waste of space. Imagine if you wake up, walk downstairs, you use your crawl space, but you have bicycles. Wouldn't it be nice to have your car down there? Over time, people will end up putting garages in where garages made. I couldn't imagine walking down in a new house that I built or just bought and seeing all the space, but yet you're having to park 75 feet away in a parking lot. To me, it doesn't make any sense. We also designed the homes so when you're driving down Ashley and you're driving down Orrs, you cannot see the garages. We base the garages on the alleyway on purpose so that it doesn't look like it's elevated from the street. In regards to that, we have access to do different type of garage doors, which I think would be a good point for the city. Instead of doing just a cheaper white fiberglass door, maybe they could say, hey, you could do a door if it's a faux wood or some type of nicer door system. But with all these items, we're still only 38 feet. Whether it's a 3-story house or a 2.5-story house, we're still at 38 feet. Most of the homes that he showed you in the video, I tried to sell one last year. The flood insurance was $7,800 a year. Every single one of those homes is currently non-conforming. What do you think about that for a second? Non-conforming. If you look at the photos, there was hardly any difference in the aesthetics of the house from a 2.5 story to a 3-story height. However, the benefits of the 3-story is so much greater than that of a 2.5 story. And again, the height will not change at all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Does anyone else like to speak in favor of this application? Does anyone like to speak in opposition to the application? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Please come forward and tell us who you are. Gentlemen, if you all have a seat, we greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Tell us who you are and where you live. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laverne, and I am the 3rd generation of 312 Ashley Avenue. I am here in front of you tonight with my 81-year-old father and my 35-year-old daughter. I also have a 31-year-old daughter who is currently working overseas as a civilian. I've had conversations with Mr. Chestnut. We stood out in your vestibule out there for a good 2 hours and spoke. He promised to provide the plans, the pictures of which you are seeing tonight. However, he has failed us. We live adjacent to this, and last night at 7:12 p.m., he sent me half of what you received here. He only sent me 3 stories. He did not send me 2 stories. The plan was that I would meet with the neighbors, since I have the technology, and get them all of this information so that they can review it. There are people, multi-generational families, living adjacent to this as 313, as 310, and as well as 317. They're saying no simply because none of us have true factual information that we are looking at. You know, we're told it's 3 bedrooms, now it's 2 bedrooms. Well, what is it? We are looking at this information that I was sent is not even what was presented completely tonight. So once again, as we got 315 rammed down our throats, we don't have a lot of trust that what's being presented is what's actually going to be built. So I can't support a project when I don't even have all of the factual information. I would have loved to have had that in a timely manner to present to all of the residents who live adjacent to this project to review, keeping in mind that we all know that the neighborhood is going through gentrification. Many of the residents that live there are my father's age, and so therefore the children like me are the ones that are coming back trying to hold on to our neighborhood. But I feel as if our voices are not important. We have been disrespected. To send me something with a timestamp of 7:12 and to call me at 6:30 for a meeting that is today. I don't even have time to present anything to anyone, any of the neighbors. So I can't support a project that I cannot get factual information. We have concerns about what happens to our infrastructure if this goes through. This gentleman has said to me, I can just build it as is. And if we've said to him, fine, do what you want. But we're not going to support this without all of the facts. On the July the 28th, after move-out weekend, we had 2 fire calls. One was for a minor kitchen fire that was put out. However, that requires 7 engines to come out due to the close proximity of the buildings. One kitchen fire that gets out of hand can actually wipe that entire block out. So my concern is infrastructure. What's going to happen to the infrastructure? That's great. You're talking about stormwater and flooding. How are you going to handle water and water pressure? How are we going to handle sewer and sewerage? How are all of these things going to be handled as you increase the density? You have a 4-bedroom, 4.5 bath monstrosity that's at 315. The only thing you can do with that is it's income property. It's a rental. I don't see any family in their right mind moving on the opposite side and actually purchasing and living. This property is going to become an investor property. I've actually been told by the owner of 315 he's trying to get this project through so that he can dump all of this property off on the next investor. So we're not real happy with how this is going. I would just like Mr. Chestnut and the other gentleman to be forthcoming with the information so that the neighbors can make a decision whether to support it or not to support it.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Anyone else like to speak in opposition to the application? Yes, sir. Come on up. You are here, but tell us who you are again.
Sure. Yeah. Sam Spence from the Preservation Society. The Preservation Society is opposed to this request to upzone to a 3-story height district. Our concerns have to do with all the proposals across the board, all the agenda items tonight pertaining to these properties. As we said, on Ashley Avenue, the streetscape is predominantly 1 to 2.5 story buildings, with the exception of isolated examples of out-of-scale new construction. We feel confident that a reasonable new construction program can be achieved with the current zoning and would be better respect the scale and character of the surrounding neighborhood. As Mr. Morgan said, even so, then on Ashley Avenue, on Orr's Court, the streetscape is characterized by even smaller scale development, with a number of breathing cottages and other 1-story structures composing a very sensitive historic context. We'd also like to point out, as was already discussed a little bit, that the proposed amendment to the ordinance tonight, to the 2.5-story height district ordinance, would make projects like this more feasible. The Preservation Society supports those changes, and they provide a little more flexibility in the height zone or in the flood zones. And if adopted, we think this project could be built feasibly with 2 stories over an elevated foundation, which we think is reasonable and compatible with the context. Further, we appreciate the Commission's previous discussion about the negative impacts of making piecemeal changes to the zoning map, and we feel it's important to uphold the integrity of the height districts that were intentionally drawn to respond to the existing contexts. We support City staff's position and ask the Commission to recommend this approval of these requests.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Thanks. Mr. Lawrence, come on up and tell us who you are. I know who you are, but for the record, tell us where you live.
Nice seeing y'all. Thank you, our city staff. My name is Lawrence, and I've lived in this community over 7 years. I wouldn't say the plus, but city staff are working hard to bridge to build a bridge between developers and people that live in this community. And I thank you for your hard work. Now, when you create a regulation for height, and I was a unit administrator, and you have different regulations, like 250. 250 is dealing with training. You can't add, you can't subtract, got to follow what's the guideline. If it's a 2.5 stories, that's what you have to follow. Now, you have people that live in this Freeman cottage from the 40s up to now. They worked hard. They went to trial and tribulation to buy their property so that when they reach the senior age, they can live there in peace. They can be able to park in front of their house and do what they have to do instead of being harassed. And the sun is being blocked off by these high monster buildings that people try to put in the community. Now, when they talk about green space around my community, we have a whole lot of green space. Like the photo that the city showed, they showed you all the green space that's there. Now, in the city, Stormwater Commission have guidelines that if you build on a property, you have to make sure that the water do not run off your property onto someone else's property. You have to do that because you can be liable for them. Now, if you open the gate for this 3-story building, and we are seeing what's happening in the west side. You have other development coming in on the west side, on Sumter Street, it's probably on Fishburne Street, all over the west side. And if you approve them to have a 3-story, all those senior citizens, all those Freeman cottages will be overshadowed and problems. And what that would do, you causing the people that who live there over all these years to be mean, because people are parking and people drive away, and walk a block away to get into these monster homes. And so those people have to call the city of Charleston to tow their car away and give them a $45 ticket. And that's what these monster homes, what people trying to build with these 3 stories. It's about economics and about bringing people in. And I'm glad, Mr. Chairman, at that meeting you had earlier, you alluded to affordable housing. When people come and say they're going to have affordable housing, the people that pick up all these trash in the city, work in these hospitals, work in these doctor's office, work in this grocery store, can't afford anything on this peninsula. So when they come and say they're going to be affordable, it's affordable to who? We are in the medical district. Medical students coming to go to MUSC, students coming to go to Citadel, all these places, and they don't have parking space because they build these houses, they rent them out, and they have to have 4 or 3 students in each bedroom to meet the rent. So don't destroy those Freeman cottages and don't displace those residents who live here over 80 years and 70 years. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence, for your testimony. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Excuse me for walking in front of you.
And just tell us who you are and where you reside, if you would.
My name is Marcus Williams,
Yes, sir.
and I live on Newton Street. My question is that I heard last couple of meetings ago that the city are not requiring people to have that space underneath their house that has a garage. And I want to make sure if that's true or not, because if they build this particular home that they're trying to build, it's not up to us to make room for them to build a garage on there because it's supposed to be space. So what he just proposed just a few minutes ago said, how would you like to have a car? You know, get a smaller car and let it go underneath there. Because what you're trying to do is the space is not going to be utilized anyway. So that's because the flood has set the standard. If the height is 6 foot or 7 foot, or whatever the case may be, you have to add it, subtract that from what you're trying to build. So in that particular situation, is that flood has a code that's standard. So we are meeting that. So they have to meet that as well. And then when they go to the height, they have to do that as well. The city said that you get 1.5 parking. So now all of a sudden you got your garage, if you're gonna do that, then you got another 1.5 outside. So that means that's 2 cars already outside. The turning radius on the car, if you take the house next to it, which is 315, it's gonna be kind of congested trying to get in and out of that particular space that they have. And if I was one of those persons that bought one of those homes, how would I determine if I'm a guest of the person that owns the house and they only got 6 spots there, so somebody's gonna get eliminated from those spots. So it's a first come, first served situation. So who the guest gonna be? So those are the questions I am. That's why I think that we should not approve of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, ma'am, Mr. Olay, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cashin Drolet, Charleston Foundation, 48 East Bay Street. We are opposing agenda items 1 through 4 this evening. While we sympathize with the applicants seeking the additional height to accommodate their 10 residence programming for the site with drive-under parking, we are concerned by the precedent this rezoning would establish. 3 stories is not appropriate for the historic West Side neighborhood ordinance. Section 54, 30615 obligates the Planning Commission to review requests for height rezonings on context, character, street width, and compatibility with surrounding properties. The properties in question, they're located on small-scale residential streets, and they're surrounded by buildings ranging from 1 to 2.5 stories. That half-story is the predominant roof form in the West Side and an important character element. Using the evaluation criteria provided in the ordinance, we have significant concerns about scaling, about compatibility with existing neighborhood buildings, and overall character of the neighborhood from a macro perspective. Respectfully, we would encourage the commission to deny these height rezoning requests, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ms. Rowley. Anyone else like to speak in opposition to this, these applications? If not, Mr. Richardson or Mr. Chestnut, would you like to respond to the applicants? Thank you.
Thanks, sir. So, first of all, I want to apologize to Ms. Laverne. That was a team coordination drop with us. Mr. Chestnut thought we were going to be at next month's here, and he set his schedule a little bit. So, regardless of the outcome tonight, we will meet with you, and we will provide you all the information. We believe strongly in it, and again, there are a lot of items that came up that we can help clarify and also dispel. So, with 10 units on this, it is considered by zoning to be a multifamily property. And so that requires you to have 1.5 spaces per unit. That's not realistic. So we go ahead and provide 2 per. We also provide guest parking, which you're not required to. We fill that in. As far as turning radius for cars and access through the TRC process, we have to provide what are called auto turn models, which are computer data drafting. It's almost like playing with matchboxes. So you have all the cars, you have to show how they get in, how they get out, because it is required that the front of your car, your headlights have to leave the site, you can't back into the right of way. So all of these spaces, including, we have a legal provision where we have to still honor a driveway easement with 315 Ashley because it is recorded. So we had to model not only these, but also those spaces to make sure that they are accessed, and we are doing that. These properties are within the hose length of the right-of-ways, and we're also going to be providing residential sprinklers for all of these. For the flood conditions in the garage space, Mr. Wim, I've talked several times, it does not matter if you drive a Tesla or you drive a Tahoe. The building code height is still the same, and that is for personal safety, particularly striking your head. Also is an ADA requirement for universal access for folks, which means they can safely navigate the space. It's still 6'8". So we still have to meet that minimum height. Let's see what else. I'm not surprised the Preservation Society and Historic Charleston Foundation opposed this. They opposed us years ago when we were elevating structures in the east side to preserve them. They felt like nothing should be elevated, that we should just simply stick Charleston frozen in time and let the weather conditions do what they may. They'll agree with that. And also, anytime we do new construction with a TRC process, we're not allowed to build anything below flood. So we don't think it's responsible to leave things as they are. As Mr. Chamberlain said, most of these properties that are around us in historic conditions are non-conforming, and they face very high flood insurance rates. If you're above the flood line in the state of South Carolina, your base policy is something like $200. These are almost $10,000. So that's a huge burden for folks to bear. My family has personally owned a historic home in coastal North Carolina. We dealt with the same issues, and it's a challenge. You buy a home, you invest in it, you start a family there, multi-generations of the hope, but the weather is a constant issue. I grew up in floodplain, hurricane zones. I get it. It's very challenging, but that's also why we converted to doing what we do on a professional basis. So, we believe in this project and this request. Again, I believe I was the first applicant to ask for this when it was initiated on 44 Cannon Street. We had a parcel that is below 5 feet. We asked for it again last year and got it as well at 228 President Street, which is also below 5 feet. So we can all continue to just keep heads buried in the sand on some of these things, or we can do what is responsible and treat these sites, which not only deal with flood conditions for storm events, but also daily rain flood issues, that affect not only people within our bounds, but also outside of our bounds. So we have an offer and an opportunity here to fix the site conditions and to improve those for our neighbors. We're not asking for any additional height, so I'll make that very clear. We're still capped at 40 feet. We're simply asking to have 2 full levels of building program above garage storage for all the cars that we have on here. These are modest homes. They average 1,200 square feet, and these are tight floor plans. We have them in front of you. These are real examples. We do these infill projects downtown all the time. None of the easy parcels are left. I don't get any squares above flood. I get funky shapes that we have to figure out. We have all these codes. We meet with all the neighborhoods, do our best to provide affordable and attainable housing as we can. We worked with all the councilmen in the district to help achieve that. If you want to, every day it seems we have something in the paper about Charleston's affordable housing problem. How can we solve it? People want to try to solve it with really big sites and really big money. The city has a lot of money, I think over $40 million. Guess what they don't have? A site. You got one project, and that's the Grace Homes project that leads to the meeting. That's it. And that's in challenging flood conditions. So how do we do it? We do it in the trenches every day on sites like this, because that's the only way to do it. Because people are just going to keep talking and pushing and talking and pushing that can down the road. I hope we get a site one day. That'd be great. Got all this money. We're doing it, and we're doing it on the private development side, and we're working within the code. You all have a mechanism that currently exists in the zoning code, in the height ordinance section for this very reason. This is why it was created. This is why it has been enacted from time to time. That is our modest and respectful request. If you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Thank you. That'll close the public aspect of this. Any questions? Ms. Jacobs?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I appreciate you allowing me to speak first, because I may take a minute. I remember very clearly when we were talking about this a couple meetings ago, and Commissioner Bailey, his first thing out of his mouth was, we're not a technical review committee, we're a planning commission. And yes, we cannot live in a silo where we don't think about all these other things, but it's not quite frankly my responsibility to figure out all these technical details. We have a technical review committee that handles that for the city for all these projects. In addition, Mr. Morgan pointed out to us what our raison d'etre is about reviewing this without context. He read it to us, and we put it back up on the screen. While I was listening to all of this right now, I opened up my book, because I always keep the ordinance that we have that guides us in front of me, because it's very important. And I'm going to read it to you because I think it's important. When we're studying proposed changes by the Planning Commission, unless initiated by the Planning Commission, all proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance or map, zoning map, which is what we're doing right now, to be pursued by City Council shall be reviewed by the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission shall study the need and justification for the change based upon a determination of the following facts. And the one that's most important here is the possible effects of a change in the ordinance or map on the character of the zone district, a particular piece of property, a neighborhood, or the community. But basically what that says to me is we have a do no harm statement in the ordinance. God should do no harm. That doesn't mean we shouldn't think about things. It doesn't mean we shouldn't consider things. But I think right here tonight is one of these very important things. First of all, there are no guarantees that when we grant this, that this project will be done. Somebody doesn't have a contract here between us and them. And also, we spent a lot of time reviewing an ordinance from Mr. Roberts to show how we can build really small houses and make them work. So why is that creativity not being used here? So with all of that said, I would like to hear from my other commissioners that I really feel that we have to consider what we're doing here very carefully and not just piecemeal something that's been brought.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Other commission members? You know, I'd like to say that it's very difficult. I see, and I appreciate Mr. Richardson just not describing this. It's very tough to do a project downtown. I mean, I can't imagine pulling whatever hair I have out left, but it's very tough with not only the technical side, but what you can fit in with the flood zones, everything else. So it's very difficult. I know that. Other commission members?
Yeah, you don't mind, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate, Mr. Richardson, your comment about you working on the hard projects. And I would look at my colleagues and say, we always end up with the hard ones too. That's the hard ones come to us, the easy ones get dealt with somewhere else. Among the things we've heard about that are important to all of us who live in this city are affordability of our housing, flooding, neighborhood character, height, among all sorts of other things. And in a perfect world, all of the decisions that we make, those things would all align every time. Affordability, flood zone, neighborhood character, and height we could say these are all good on this project, so we're good with that one, and these are all bad on that project, and so we don't want to do that. But there are projects where we have to make judgments because those things are in conflict. Sometimes adhering to the flood zone makes the project and the product more expensive. Sometimes the height, although we would like more density, is not in character with the neighborhood. And so, I think that's what we're dealing with here. Is we're dealing with all of these things that we're supposed to consider on the ordinance that Christopher has up on the screen, and we have to make a judgment about, in this case, what's the most important thing. And it's not going to be the same for every project. Some projects we think among these criteria, some are more important than others. And I hear what our neighbors are saying that came here, and I think Christopher, I appreciate the photographs and the video. I mean, I think we know this neighborhood, we know the character of the neighborhood, and I think in my opinion, in this case, we have to. That is my priority in this case is the context and the neighborhood character. So I would like to make a motion to deny the application. Yes, sir. And Mr. Richardson, you do a great job, Mr. Chestnut. You've hired a great consultant because we see Mr. Richardson a lot, and he always makes a very compelling presentation, and he's very good at what he does. But in this case, I'm going to oppose it.
So there's a motion by Ms. Hussein to deny the application, second by Ms. Jacobs. Other comments?
Can you clarify
Yes, sir.
that motion? Is that motion for?
Yeah, I'm sorry, items 1 through 4.
Yeah.
2, 3, and 4.
Thank you.
Support
I'm
staff.
sorry,
Yeah,
3,
3,
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Support
One
staff
is-
disapproval.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's one.
Well, one was deferred.
No.
No, okay, I'm sorry.
1, 2, red, 1, 2.
Yeah, 1,
Yeah.
2, 3, 4.
So I can sense which way the wind's blowing on this, and I'm probably going to be the outlier here, which is okay. I agree with everything you just said. I think what's challenging for me is we're not looking at a height issue, we're looking at a massing issue, and we're also looking at a flood zone issue. If this were presented in the capacity of where we say it's a conforming garage with 2 stories above, I think it would kind of be a different conversation because the height is limited. The garage has to be conforming. So while I understand, I still think there's a lot of misunderstanding happening within the community. I don't know, if those conversations maybe took place, that could have been more helpful. But to hear people saying, the height is going to block out, and the height is going to be the height.
Same 40.
And so that's where I'm struggling because it's a massing issue. I love the idea of affordable housing here, regardless. I agree with the gentleman who said our affordable housing is not really affordable. I think you're 100% on target with that. But it is better. It's better than some of the other things that could be built. So, like I said, I can see which way the wind is blowing, but I just want to explain my position on that.
I hear you, and it's a tough situation. Anyone else?
Can I
Yes, sir.
ask, and I just spoke, so I apologize to my colleagues.
That's all right.
Mr. Richardson, this page of your handout, I think was very enlightening to me. Could you just go through what we're looking at, just so everybody understands that?
Sure, Chamberlain stole my copy, but I'll be happy.
No, you can borrow mine if you want. I've been looking at it since the last. Yeah.
And what we noticed really was there just wasn't there was a lot of mystery, and usually as humans, mystery breeds fear. So I just thought, what if we went ahead and mapped it out so you could see? So what you have below is a 2.5 story. What you have above is a 3 story. So below is our current conditions, our current conditions with an allowable garage. And above is a 3-story with the allowable. So if you have, what we were showing is because of procedural application where we were asking to get it up to 3 stories so we could have 2 full stories above. The garage is the thing that folks are really focused on, but for us, when you compare this elevation along with the floor plans, you see the impacts. So again, there are 2.5 stories down here and there are 3 above. So you have a difference of a bedroom and a bathroom by negating the 3rd story. And again, the total structure height is max of 50 feet.
So one other question and clarification on this one that shows the parking plan. What you just went through on looking down on this one, this is this parking situation that this is allows the 2.5 story one, the one on the bottom line. Which of the parking schemes here corresponds to that?
So
because
there's a slight difference, and that's why.
Okay.
The one above, the colored plan shows, using this project as an example, if you were precluded from parking under, you'd have to park all those cars on site.
Got it. And
so we can build this right now, but only have a story and a half, and we have extremely limited. It just kills the program. And so why we asked for that extra half story is to go from 1 bedrooms to 2. We're not doing a massive student housing project. We're trying to really get 2 bedrooms per home. It's a very modest request. Usually we're seeing folks who are trying to stretch a 4-bedroom to a 5-bedroom. You know, it's a very different program. We have one of our employees lives a couple streets over on Lawrence, and you know, she was lucky to get in when she did. It's a larger house and it's much more expensive now, and you know, today she would not be able to afford that house. But when we have new employees coming here, that's the challenge, because what we don't want, you know, a housing issue really translates, vice versa. So we don't want folks to live far out. They have to get in. Our roads are already strained as they are. So they all come back to a central, varied housing product solutions on the peninsula as well. And that's why it was showing, like, we can do this right now. It'll become a parking lot. We don't want to do that.
I guess my question is, this scheme that shows the under unit parking, can that be done in the 2.5 story product?
It can, and you only have a story and a half above it. So you only have 2 bedrooms, which they're not feasible, they're not logical, they don't make any sense. And one could argue, if you did a parking study, that 1-bedroom units are worse on the peninsula as construction than 2 bedrooms, because you're able to accommodate more folks.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Got it. Anyone else?
I'm going to say one more thing. I also think a lot of it comes down to presentation. When I hear 3-story, that sounds massive. It sounds scary. If we go back to this, if we ever get this ordinance amendment written, if it were to read something like 2 full stories above a conforming garage, well, to me that sounds sensible and reasonable, as opposed to 3-story, which sounds tall and looming and overwhelming and out of sync with the neighborhood. So just as we discuss it, I think perhaps that's a better way to phrase it.
Again, I agree with you. And you still have the 40-foot
Right.
limit. So, there is a motion by Mr. Hussein, second by Ms. Jacobs. Other questions, comments by commission members? Again, Mr. Richardson, I appreciate the work you do, and I appreciate you being here before us and explaining. I agree with Hussein, you do wonderful work, and we've seen you before. And it's a very tough situation for us to deal with, but I have to vote with the motion. But anyway, I'm all in favor of the motion by Mr. Hussein, second by Ms. Jacobs, to deny the application. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone in opposition? So let the record show there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor, 1 opposed to the motion.
Thanks for
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, and for the record, I need to say Ms. Harrison recused herself from these items. So just for the record, don't rezoning 1, 2, 3, and 4, Ms. Harrison recused herself. Come on back in, Ms. Harrison. Oh, the last vote. Next item on the agenda is number 5, 1040 Gardner Road, Jenkins Woods, West Ashley, TMS number 351150027.94 acres. Request zoning from Job Center JC to Business Park PP. Mr. Morgan.
Yes, this is an area of West Ashley that we did our UWOP plan for a few years ago, and some properties were zoned to Job Center. A lot of them had existing development on them. This is one case in point, and I'll show you some pictures of it. And the applicants are interested in having another use within the development that does not fit in our zoning code in Job Center. And so they would like to rezone to Business Park, which is also somewhat predominant in this area. There are some differences. It's a little bit more like industrial. It's a little bit more flexible in the hours of operation. But given the character of this area, and I'm going to show you that, I'm kind of jumping ahead. This is Sandberg here. Wapu Road is right here. There are office, industrial type parks over here. Gardner comes in off Sam Rittenberg and then continues on over here. There are some residentials as you head down Jenkins Road here, and there's definitely more residential over here off Wapu that was part of the DUWOP plan. Also, and Ms. Jenkins helped me remember this, this is an area that is also nearby to one of our settlement areas. And the settlement area boundaries that were mapped based on the best info we have. You know, there may be some changes over time, but there is a settlement area a little bit here further to the west. Here's the subject property here. And it does show a job center in this image here from the comprehensive plan. That is based on the DUWOP plan. Back up a little bit. Here's the difference between Job Center and Business Park. And of course, Job Center does have a little bit more restrictive limits on hours of operation than Business Park does. Let's go to the definition here. And here's an aerial of the structures that are on the property and nearby, like industrial type structures. So you can see some pretty big structures out here. This is a street view of the subject property here. So fairly attractively landscaped quasi industrial type properties here. Here they are aerial image. And our recommendation on this is for approval because we felt like the business park was not a huge difference from the job center. And this is something that will help the owners make better utilization of their property here. And the owners will be able to explain why they were requesting the business park on the site.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Is the applicant here with us? 1040 Gardner Road, anyone here? Well, I'm asked, is anyone here to support the application? Is anyone here and opposed to the application? Thank you. That's a close aspect of this. Ms. Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to give a little bit of context. I'm going to support staff's recommendation, but I just want this in the record. I did a lot of work with the city, with the settlement community, and what we don't really realize, and I'm going to give you a visual to if you think Wapu Road, Ashley River Road, Savage Road, all the way to the mall, was originally huge African American settlement community. And it's been slowly dissolved over time with the highway coming in and turning commercial, but there are little enclaves everywhere. And I knew about this area, Jenkins Woods, Jenkins Hill, when I was helping the city with this. The mapping is very loose because we don't have anything that said this is where the community was, border to border. And I drove down there just to refresh my memory on this application. And as I drove down, there's still some people that live back in there, little cottages on these large blocks of land. And there was a man swinging under a tree on a swing. But it's all industrial around them. I mean, we're not out of context here. And I just wanted to put on the record, my big concern here was the hours of operation, because there are still people that live in this area. That you're going from a business zoning that's being used currently, as you see on the map, and with all kinds of businesses around it, but you're moving to a zoning that has no limits in hours of operation. So I just wanted everybody, that to be on the record. And also, we put in our city plan that we would identify these settlement communities and respect them as we made land use choices moving forward. So I'm going to respectfully ask that we continue to do that as part of our agenda whenever we have even a tiny address, that we at least have this conversation before we make that decision, because we committed to it in the city plan. I think it's a respectful thing to do.
Thank you.
And I will make a motion to support this, but I do think we should think about that moving forward, especially with hours of operation and industries around.
Ms. Jacobs moves to approve this.
I second.
Second, by Ms. Brian Jenkins. Any other comments, questions? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any other in opposition? Six in favor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can count 7 in favor. None opposed. Sorry.
7 in favor?
Yes, none opposed. The next item on the agenda is Plan Unit of Development PUD, number 1 property from Battery Island Drive, East Ferry, James Island, TMS number 33405. 00023, 022, 055, parcel 7.8 acres. Requesting zoning of 2 properties, and I'm not going to read all the tax map numbers. Rural residential, 1 is zoning 1 property, planned unit development, Battery Island PUD. Ms. Morgan, are you doing this or?
Yes.
Great,
I'll
thank
do the
you.
introduction and then the development team will give some more background on that. So to orient you all to this site, this is on Lower Folly Road down near, of course, Battery Island, right off of Old Folly here. There's a PSD fire station in this area. There's a couple of, there's a restaurant out here as well as an older, it's called the Barrel that is now closed on the property in the city that was started in business. The subject properties have been in the city for a good while. The ones that are already in the city have been in the city for a good while, I think a couple of decades. Lightened up, I'm sorry, rural residential, RR1, which is a 3.5 unit and acre designation. There's a property that they would annex. As part of this, it's had a pending annexation, and it would come into the city, and I believe it's about acre. I need to check back in the PUD for that, but it all makes up for a PUD that is a little bit over 7 acres. I'll PUD in just a minute, but a couple of things to orient you here about the urban growth boundary. With the new comprehensive plan, we did include all of Folly Road, both frontages, in the urban growth boundary, because the feeling was Folly Road had really developed in a little bit more of an urban fashion. But as soon as you get off Folly Road, it really does change in a lot of these areas and becomes a good bit more rural. So it's really just the properties that have frontage on Folly that are inside the UGB. All of these subject properties that are part of this PUD are actually outside the UGB. So typically what we're looking for there is much, much lower density, typically 1 unit an acre or less. But we do have the quandary here, and this is part of it, one of the things you all have to look at tonight, that they already have existing RR1 zoning at 3.5 units an acre, and then they have county neighborhood commercial zoning that's covered by the county's Folly overlay. Then we go to our comp plan, and this also creates some quandary. This is showing in our kind of low impact and conserved area, which again, according to the comprehensive plan, we're really only supposed to recommend for densities of 1 unit an acre or less. But they already have some existing density that's higher than that. But another aspect of our low impact and conserved recommendation in the comp plan is that it says that that when you do have development in these areas, it needs to be with structures that are likely to be elevated so as not to impair intertidal systems. Uses are limited in residential densities, limited to less than 1 unit an acre. So I think you can see in this discussion of this PUD that there's been a lot of efforts to get close to that. And definitely having elevated structures and innovative stormwater and things like that. But I didn't want to gloss over the fact that it is in a very challenged area that over time will be very challenged with stormwater and sea level rise issues, things like that. All right, so to go into a little bit more info, basically these are undeveloped parcels. One of them does provide access to a developed parcel that's here adjacent to it, and that will continue through the PUD. We have county parcel at present. There are a number of uses that are allowed here, such as a hotel with up to 10 guest rooms, a bar or lounge, assisted living, childcare, medical office, all other types of offices, farmers markets, things like that. So the idea that, this is only a residential area is not really correct. This is an area that has a diversity of uses allowed already under that county zoning for this parcel here. So where this PUD does not be approved, this would, of course, revert back to the county zoning that has a good bit of commercial applicability to it. Here are some images of the property. Here you see at the corner of Battery Island and Old Valley Road. Looking to the west, this is an axial aerial image. Marsh is across Battery Island Road from it, and then it's basically a wooded tract and wooded heading up in this direction. And these are the TRC documents that have come forward from their review. This is the essential layout of the development. It would be this small inn of 20 rooms. Again, the applicant team will do a much better job of presenting this than I will, but just kind of giving you the overview. And there would be 16 residential lots, as well as access to the other residence that's here where the cursor is. There would be a pump station that would handle the sewer for the site. Then there would be a good bit of green space here, in the kind of the finger that extends up in this location. The site plan has access here, good bit of stormwater management areas, a tremendous amount of green space. I think I had calculated it was open or green space was around 40%, something like that. But the applicants can get into that detail. And a total of 16 units here, which ends up being 2.4 units an acre, which would be, less dense than the current allowance, but not quite to the level of the outside UGB recommendation or the low impact and conserve recommendation. And when we look at those, we're taking into account the fact that they do have 3.5 units an acre on it. We have all the TRC comments here, the ADA comments, as if we can always go back to these if need be. Our feeling with this is that they're making an excellent effort on the stormwater. They're making a good effort to get to the densities closer to what the recommendations are. We've heard about concerns with the hotel, and so we wanted to have a few conditions that we were going to recommend, and I'll kind of go over these real quickly. Obviously, the planning commission can add to these, subtract from these, whatever they might want to do, but our suggestions were that the PUD be very clear, it would not be a restaurant or bar on the proposed end, that if somehow the end was not developed, that future uses for commercial in the PUD would be limited to only office or limited farm produce type sales. It has to have mixed use to be a PUD based on how our zoning ordinance works. But if the end did not happen, those would be developed uses that might work that would still allow it to be mixed use. We also would like, just like every other new hotel in the city has to do, have the applicant to commit to contribute to the City of Charleston Affordable Workforce Housing Account, a fee payable upon the issuance of CO, calculated as follows: at $5.10 per square foot of area for sleeping units and hallways, adjacent to sleeping units, elevators. That goes into our workforce housing fund. And again, every new hotel in the city is having to contribute that same amount. And then also make sure that the inn provides off-street parking at the rate of 2 spaces to meet the design requirements of section 54.316 of the zoning ordinance for each 3 sleeping units, that it commits to environmental sustainability and recycling, and that it has long-term provisions of on and off-site parking for employees who drive vehicles to work, including an estimate will drive to work during the maximum shift, and the location of parking spaces to be provided. These are all from some of the criteria that are done through the special exception process, which would be a normal hotel process. And so we thought these were very relevant to this site and included these in this discussion. And we would recommend approval of this with these conditions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Morgan. Yes, sir, you the applicant, tell us.
I am, thank you guys very much. My name is Gary Lassane. I'm one of the owners. Good evening, Christopher Morgan, staff, chair, vice chair, commissioners. Once again, I'm Gary Lassane. This is Ty Cohen. This is Jerry Shear. We are 3 of the 4 owners of Battery Island Community LLC. So we wanted to be sure that you guys could actually put a face on us and understand that, hey, you know, we're local guys here in Charleston. The 4th owner is Ty's father, our father Cohen. So it's us 4. We've got a development background and a building background. I'm gonna start in and basically just kind of give a bit of a chronology of where we started and how we got here today. And then I'm gonna turn it over to Joshua Robinson to, you know, kind of talk all the technical stuff about the project. So thank you guys very much once again. All right, so I've been spearheading this project from the community development standpoint, as is my professional background. Joshua Robinson is our project engineer. Many of you may know Joshua's background as an award-winning engineer developing innovative, eco-friendly conservation projects. He does a great job. Before I jump full in, our team would like to extend a thank you to Christopher Morgan and the TRC staff. As guys, we truly feel that we've got a better product today post TRC. It's a daunting staff, but you guys were honest. You guys forced us to make necessary changes to get to where we are today, and we thank you for that. We feel we've got a better product. So wanted to get that out of there. I'd also like to take this opportunity on behalf of our group to voluntarily amend our master plan on record to clarify that the 16 residential homes uses shall be limited solely to long-term rentals or for sale. There shall be no short-term rentals involved. Also, as is stated within the master plan, there's no ADUs that will be constructed. So there won't be a back-end situation where you've got a house today and then, you know, 6 months down the road, there's an ADU coming in. So no ADUs will be constructed as well. Recognizing the future land use regulations came into effect after our submittals, we have worked diligently towards respecting the land use by capping our density to 2.4 homes per acre, as opposed to the zoning at the time of submittals, which allowed 3.5 homes per acre for the residential zoned areas. We're preserving 2.77 acres of open preservation green space. What's important here is that this preservation green space is open to the neighboring communities. We have also ensured that we've got parking within the development for these neighboring communities that choose to come in and utilize this preservation space to their benefit. This is something that our PUD is doing. You know, I mean, maybe someone wants to come in, you know, kids from James Island High School or whatever, and have an opportunity to walk through some nature trails and say, hey, you know, here's a tree, or they're doing a report for school and they've got a place that they can actually safely do those things. Our property totals 7.1 acres. As Christopher stated, you know, we've got, you know, close to an acre that's within Charleston County and is zoned commercial Folly Road overlay district. The current zoning allows for an array of by right opportunities, as Christopher already stated, so I'm not going to repeat it. We all know what they are. We purchased this subject property in late 2020 and continued to assemblage. Early 2021, we began working with the community and leadership of Beatfield. I thank you all. Which is comprised, Beatfield community, for those that don't know, is comprised of approximately 27 homes, of which 8 to 9 of those 27 homes are in the city jurisdiction. The other 20 or 19 are in the county. to discuss our goals and also to be able to coexist with the community. We held our first Zoom meeting in 2021 and invited all residents to participate. Some participated, some did not. Some residents had great questions and offered wonderful feedback, all of which we implemented in our plan. To quote the association leadership, on August 7th, 2022, which would have been well over a year within the process, Gary, I am so grateful for you all's commitment. I speak on behalf of the community when I say we welcome the Battery Island LLC. As stated, I believe we'll be able to support each other's existence. Again, thank the partners for being supportive. We felt great about it. Following our initial meeting with the community, the leadership, we introduced the project to then Councilwoman Carol Jackson. Let's just say that came with another list of boxes that we had to check. To garner.
We know Ms. Jackson.
Yeah, okay, so to garner Ms. Jackson's support. Ms. Carol Jackson introduced our team to the engineer, Joshua Robinson, which we're super thankful for. We stayed the course and we garnered Ms. Jackson's support and maintained full support of the Neighborhood Association through September 16th, 2022, as we went through TRC and started preparing for Planning Council. Most recently, we have heard remarks related to the accommodations use area of our project. And we feel residents being concerned that traffic may be an issue, being concerned that higher taxation as a result of our project may be levied against their homes, flooding, noise, and lastly, the community has raised concerns that our guests will ride bikes to Folly Beach. All valid, normal concerns, which we have addressed and are willing to continue addressing, providing the technical data thus supporting. Commissioners, we have a favorable traffic report. You all are perhaps better at explaining the taxation aspect than I. However, it is our belief that the residents' taxes on their homes will not increase as long as they're still permanently residing in those homes. Their values may increase, and it's also our belief that that's good for everybody. You've got a higher value. We successfully passed Kinsey's requirements in stormwater department. And we do believe and we do hope that we will exceed the requirements asked of us. Noise will be managed by professional management that will ensure that we don't have a party facility. Lastly, we will encourage our guests to ride bikes to Folly Beach as we fully support the Rethink Folly Road Vision Path, which encourages pedestrians and bike path activity to and from Folly Beach as part of the Neighborhood Preservation Vision Plan. To quote the Rethink Folly Road, those residing in or traveling through the neighborhood preservation area will benefit from mobility improvements recommended for the corridor, including the continuous shared use path that provides non-motorized travel options for users that span a range of all ages, abilities, and mobility interests. Travel to and from the beach will be facilitated through seasonal trolley services on a dedicated lane from a park and ride lot in South Grimble, which is just right up the street, and that would be great to see. Also, simply put, commissioners, it's just good for traffic in the environment. Commissioners, we have crafted a unique infill property that closely models many aspects of our newly enacted Charleston City Plan. This PUD will be a residential and commercial component within the city of Charleston's jurisdiction, offering added taxes, hospitality taxes, and most importantly, act as a model for innovative, low-impact developments. One that we should be proud of because it coincides with the city comp plan that we worked so diligently to put out there. And this gives us the opportunity to hopefully have a model that we can say, it works. You might have to spend a little money to get it there, but it can be done. There are never perfect scenarios. However, commissioners, we stress that we have done our best to address the project in a holistic manner. We have walked away from many of our buy right opportunities within the county to be before this body today in hopes that we can offer the city of Charleston, its residents, the community, and the future a model to stand by. Because we truly believe, if given the opportunity, this will be a model that the city of Charleston, that Charleston as a whole can put a stamp on and say, this can be done. Here's proof that this can be done. When we've got these infill pockets that we need to do something about, that we need to structure in the proper way, this is an opportunity that allows us to do this. Commissioners, we ask that this PUD project be given a unanimous vote based on its merits and structure within the Charleston City Plan. Should the commissioners offer this unanimous vote with conditions related to placement, sound barriers, or such, please know that we're open and willing to make these adjustments that are feasible. Once again, the PUD will be designed and permitted in one single phase. That's a very important aspect. We're going to design this PUD, we're going to permit it in one phase, which allows everybody to be on the same page that this is happening as it should happen. There's no situation of, oh, we've got this PUD, we're just going to design and permit the residential part, and we're going to sell off the commercial part for someone else to do something else with that may not be in alignment. We're doing this in one shot. As stated, the partners are the developers, and we've got a background in construction. So I appreciate you all. I'm going to turn it over to Joshua, who's better qualified and more technical.
Let me ask you one question.
Yes,
Did you have
sir.
a chance to consider the conditions the staff presented? I don't know if you would answer that or someone else. Consider those conditions, how you feel about those?
The
Conditions and staff.
Yes, the conditions that staff has recommended.
Right.
We are 100% in support.
Okay.
And
Good.
we will adhere to those conditions.
All right, so you okay with those?
We will
Great.
gladly adhere to them because we actually, I believe that they're all proper and at the end of the day in the best interest of the city of Charleston and Charleston as a whole, especially for, you know, the money that gets distributed for affordable housing and things of that sort.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Would gladly.
Yes, sir.
Thank
you.
Thank you for making that.
Yes, sir.
recommendation.
Mr. Robertson, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Gary. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joshua Robinson. I'm a hydrologist and professional engineer, also a resident of the city of Charleston. Lived in the Burns Downs neighborhood for 11 years and grew up in Charleston. And I survived Hurricane Hugo 33 years ago today, so those who celebrate Happy Hugo Day. And I think that wading through ankle-deep water during the eye of the storm is part of what inspired me to become a hydrologist and water resources engineer. I myself and some of my colleagues at my firm, Robinson Design Engineers, were active participants in the Dutch dialogue process several years ago. We served on the design team for the Church Creek Drainage Basin and did a series of hydrology studies, worked with the city to gather grant funds that are now being implemented in the Church Creek Basin. And that relationship with the Dutch Dialogues team led to us working as part of the city plan in the land and water analysis. And in particular, we contributed, RDE, my firm contributed the water management matrix, which is the grouping of stormwater and tidal water and storm surge water measures in response to specific land use categories. So that was something we worked a lot with and worked with staff and talked to many of you during that process. and with, a variety of landowners, different interest groups. And so right as we were concluding that aspect of the water management plan as part of the land and water analysis, we were introduced to Gary and Ty and the rest of the partnership by former Councilmember Carol Jackson. And so we worked together to come up with the idea for this project as a great case study to fully implement the hot off the press recommendations of the city plan in a very challenged site because it's in a 100-year floodplain. And so for me personally, that was one of the requirements for me to be engaged in the project. We don't do a whole lot of, I don't come before you very often. We only do low impact development type projects, as Gary alluded to, that have nature-based solutions for stormwater management. And so that was one of the requirements for us to be engaged with the project, that it would be a low impact development project. And in fact, we initially were hoping to make this more of a conservation development or possibly the previous cluster development ordinance. That was all in a state of transition when we first came in and worked with staff. But ultimately, with this being approximately 7 acres, it falls beneath the 10-acre requirement of the conservation development. So we designed this as sort of a conservation development inspired project with about 40% conserved area, as Mr. Morgan mentioned earlier. But overall, we followed explicitly the recommendations of the city plan. The commercial building and the residences will feature site-scale stormwater management, including green roofs. All stormwater will be managed by stormwater constructed wetlands and bioswales. No underground storm sewers that can be filled with water during tides and all these conditions that city staff deal with in all areas that are near a salt marsh or the drain into the salt marsh. And importantly, as Mr. Morgan mentioned in the water management plan, we've conserved 1.5 acres of just totally natural areas. All the invasive plant species will be removed. It'll be reforested with native species to really try to show an example of how plan unit development can have conservation, as Gary mentioned, can be a natural area. And importantly, there'll be a public playground as part of that green space. So the conservation development ordinance requires 50% green infrastructure for stormwater management. We've actually incorporated 100% green infrastructure. So where we've been able to, we've exceeded the requirements of the conservation development. And the idea of making this a PUD actually came out of several meetings and conversations with Councilmember Jackson and staff, where we were trying to, compare our goals for the project with what the underlying zoning was and the urban growth boundary challenge, and we developed this idea of a PUD, although it's not a traditional PUD because it is pretty small. So I want to just emphasize and underline a few things that Gary said. It's important to me to point out that this is a single-phase project by a builder-developer, by an ownership team. Oftentimes, as a consulting engineer, I work with folks who have a contract to purchase property and are going through this process in hopes that they get approval. But this ownership team actually owns the land outright, and they are also builders. So from my perspective, this has the greatest chance of success. The commitments that are being made today are actually going to be followed through by the same individuals, the same humans who are actually building the houses, instead of taking blocks of houses and selling them off to national home builder fill in the blank, who may or may not want to follow these conditions explicitly. A few of we've heard a lot tonight about elevated structures, so I don't have to go into as much detail about that, but one of the important provisions as part of the residential and commercial component is that all the buildings will be elevated above the flood zone. We have elevation, we're in an AU zone ranging from elevation 12 to elevation 10. So all the structures are proposed to be elevated 1 story with all parking underneath the buildings, as you've heard so much about this evening, and then 2 stories above that, which is in keeping with the surrounding area with a lot of elevated homes because of its proximity to the marsh. Again, it's an AU zone with moderate wave action in the front, and we believe that elevating the homes pier and beam is fully consistent with the city plan, and then everything at grade, stormwater management is being managed lot by lot, and then the buildings themselves are managing. We expect about 1 to 2 inches of total rainfall on the roof through these green roofs. And importantly, through working with staff, we've excluded any sort of rooftop deck or bar space just to just go ahead and nix that idea so that the rooftops truly are a natural area and not, an elevated area to have a party. So that's the end of the details that I wanted to really point out, unless anything you'd like me to add. Yeah, thank you, Ty. The sewer for the site is provided by James Island Public Service District. There's a small force main that runs along Battery Island Drive. So part of the project includes a pump station, as Mr. Morgan mentioned before, and also the construction of a section of a new public sewer force main. We do not know the details of how that will work out yet, but our hope is that that new sewer force main will actually improve the capacity for existing residents who have individual force mains and things that tie in a really old system. So we've begun working with James Island Public Service District, and our hope is that although the pump station will serve the PUD itself, we hope that the new force main will improve the sanitary sewer conditions for the existing community that ties in to Old Poly.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? We good? Thank you. We appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners.
Yes. Would anyone in favor of this application like to speak? Is anyone there? Yes, sir. Come on up. Tell us who you are and where you live.
Hi, Rick Andrews, I own the restaurant that we're talking about on the corner of Battery Island Drive. I would just simply like to support the project. I think it's a great thing for the area. I think it's just a great area. I'm sorry, got a little bit nervous. More people to help the area. We call employment and such. So I just would like to say support. Thank you very much.
Tell us your name again, just for the record.
Rick Andrews.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it. Anyone else in favor would like to speak? Anyone in opposition? Would you like to speak? You'll come up, just tell us one at a time. Tell us who you are and where you live. Thank you. Take your time.
I'll go first.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, and thank you all for having us here. I do appreciate Mr. Morgan because until I had a phone conversation with him, I believe it was Monday.
Yes, sir. You're Mr. Richard.
Yeah.
Just again, just for the record, tell us who you are and where you live. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I live at 1804 Battery Island Drive, and I am the president of the Battery Island Drive Neighborhood Association / Beefield Community. Part of our community is city, part of the county. The county is now recognized as a historical district in Charleston County. As I was beginning to say that up until Monday, we were led to believe that there was no point in us coming to this meeting tonight because everything was already laid out and what we had to say didn't matter. I found that to be not true after I reached out and he welcomed us to come out tonight. For whatever reason why we were being told that there was no point in coming, I don't know. But I would say if you didn't want the community to come, then you really don't care about what the community thinks. We are not opposed to changes in our community. Yes, we are a very small community, 27 residential homes. And half of those residential homes are elderly people in their 80s and above. The elderly is one that's 96 years old, whose home is just a few minutes away from this development. In fact, she still drives. She don't drive Farley Road anymore, but she drives Battery Island Drive.
I don't drive Farley. I don't drive Farley Road.
We've seen a lot of changes in the last few years in our community. Senorita naturally supports this. It's going to be located just a hop and a jump across the old Farley Road to his establishment. What does that mean? That can boost his revenue. Naturally, you're going to support it. You don't live there, though. That's your place of business. We live there. We don't have sidewalks. We just now, for the first time, had the speed limit incorporated within the last 2 weeks that limit the speed coming off of Farley Road on the old Farley Road to 25 miles an hour. Before then, I'd taken pictures, sent it into the county, showing how they speed off from the senorita after not only getting filled up with food, but booze too, and leaving their skid marks all over the road. I submitted pictures, which sped up the process to get to 25 miles an hour speed limit. I have residents in my community that live on the Oak Folly Road that's going to be directly impacted by this development. A grandmother that still likes to ride her bicycle with her grandson in the evening for evening and morning exercise. I have a 92-year-old who right now is bereaving because he just lost his wife over the weekend. He still likes to walk. He put his two hands behind his back and he slowly walks across the road because he wants to look into the creek. And that's his right. And that should be a privilege and an honor for him after 92 years living in that community. He deserved that. We are not opposed to a development coming in and bringing it home because we see them as people that just looking for a place to dwell and to live and to make it their home. But we are opposed when you start talking about you want to bring, you dress it up as if bed and breakfast, the bottom line at the end of the day is a hotel. Former County Councilman Jackson, when first initially was communicating with the community about this development, she was opposed to it. And I'm going to tell you exactly why, because she came in our monthly meeting and she said, man, this development that they call affordable, it's not going to be affordable to you guys. You know who's going to be affordable to? Those ones up north that will retire and come down. And she even said, white folks, and you all know she white. And we're a black neighborhood. We got two white families mixed in now with our 27 residential homes. Yes, we were in support of this. But as time go along, this same little quiet, subtle community with a lot of elderly people, we might be slow, but we gain momentum. We're not ignorant. When we start to re-examine and look carefully and start putting some forethoughts into this, what our community is going to look like at the end of the day, when all of this is put in place, along with these two hotels. As if we didn't already have problem with the barrel, as you know, the barrel has now been closed as of August 2nd of last year at his decision, based on what a nuisance it became for the community. So now what we're looking at, we asked in our community meeting on Monday night, the question was asked, so these are affordable housing. The question was asked, well, what is the price of these homes going to be? I quote, without hesitation, it was said, $700,000. That's not what we were told in the very beginning of this discussion. Oh, but $700,000, that's not exactly what I call affordable living. So, here we are, a small community facing all these challenges, new development, you know, their lingo, their language, their designers, opposed to who we are and what we have grown accustomed to enjoy. You want to upset that. Let me talk about that bicycle riding thing. You got that from us, listening to me mentioning that in our Monday night meeting. So he decided he'd just make that work in his favor tonight. Thank you. Because I wasn't even remembering that. Thank you. I just moved back home from after living in Myrtle Beach. I seen what hotels and inns I seen the kind of crowd that it attracts. The Farley Road, you talk about trolley system, that's not gonna solve the problem. Cars are backed up 3 miles trying to get on Farley Beach. And it's backed up because you got youngsters trying to get on the beach. They want to lay out on their beach towel and they want to surf and do all the other things that young people do. So I said, who's going to occupy those 20 rooms? Those same young people you see trying to fight their way on the beach in the car. They're going to load up in there because now they can just ride their bicycle to Folly Beach and don't worry about the car traffic on the road. But then, like I said, I live in Myrtle Beach. I seen the behavior. When they come back from the beach, I see them hanging out over the balconies with their beer, bottles and cans, yelling at the tip of their lungs, waving their beach towel, and trashing out the place. And what makes more insult to injury? The Senorita Bar and Grill restaurant is right just a couple steps across. Now that you done wreaked havoc, you're gonna walk over there, get some food, and just get ready to load up again with some more alcohol. So my community, my 96-year-old and my 80-year-old and they ain't gonna be able to rest that night. See, all of this on fear is fine. But would you want to live with that? They talk about, well, we'll assist with fixing a roof on an old house because our homes are old. I tell my community, listen, we cannot compete with the developers because we don't have the money to make our home look like that. A lot of our homes are almost 100 years old, some 100. I was just blessed to be able to put my mother in a new home, and she moved in 2009, but God rest her soul, she passed in 2016. That's why I'm back home, I'm living in that home. But before that house was a 100-year-old home there. And most of the homes there now are like that. But they're real people. They're genuine people. They have a love for their community. They respect and they love their peace and quietness. When you have lived 90 years plus, 70 years, my age, 65 in 2 more months, you are entitled to some type of decency, peacefulness, and quiet, being able to walk through your community and not have to worry about the vagrant that these transients from this hotel is going to bring in. You look at the pictures, you see the intersection of Old Folly Beach Road and Folly Road. Well, just think that little area shows the impact of how small it is. And you're going to cram 2 hotels in there? Come on, y'all. You really think you want to go home to that after you done work or when you done retired? Ask yourself that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming, sir. Anyone else like to speak in opposite? Yes, sir. Come on up, tell us who you are and where you live.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
How are you, sir?
My name is Mr. Wright.
Mr. Wright, how are you?
I'm the grandson of I think the largest of DC. I just moved back home in 2014.
Okay.
I traveled, I went to the railroad, I traveled for 23 years, all over the United States. But then, kind of interrupt what we have in the family. I grew up with it. It's a nice community and fine for us. Hotel is concerned, I lived in hotels. I know what it's going to bring to that area. The Sangria, that bar and grill on the corner. You can't get over there on Saturday afternoon because of cars and loud music and everything else. Moved on 14, we had another little place down there on Folly Road.
right before you get to the damn thing public service there had a big house there. They have music and stuff. You can hear the music 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. My brother lives in Westchester. You can hear the music like it's in your living room. Homes and everything, fine. Low income homes, fine. Affordable housing, we want that. But the hotel, no, we don't need that. Because that's what it's going to bring, chaos. That's all it's going to bring. Y'all don't tell us right on King Street. On King Street at 2 o'clock in the morning. Right down to King Street, there ain't no stores there no more. Abraham, Bruce Stevens, Edward, Riley, Dad, father and son, all them gone. But they got bars and grills. It's chaos. And that's what that hotel's gonna bring. There's gonna be a problem. And I'm against that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, sir. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, ma'am. Come on up. Tell us who you are and where you live.
Good afternoon. My name is Sheila Palmer. I do not live on Greenfield. I live on Fernwood, but I come to represent my grandmother.
Yes, ma'am.
I come to the meetings for her and let her know because she used to come to the meeting with me. She's 90, she's been there over years, been there. I'm over, I've been there. All I know is Greenfield community. This is a senior citizen community. The Richardson said some people walk, some people ride bike. This is their exercise. The noise was with the barrel. I know the noise because we had it with the restaurant on Quality Road, the brick house. I advocated for it. So I think I come over there, I see the employees hanging out. I don't even want to walk. Before they had signs to not put up signs where people park on the side of the road. I couldn't even go down to my grandmother's house because I almost hit a car. Thanks to Mr. Richardson in their community, they put up no parking signs. But the noise, my grandmother, she wears a hearing aid. And when she goes outside and on her porch, she don't want to hear it because she don't put it on because of the noise. She hears everything. It bothers her. You're talking about a livelihood of senior citizens. They won't be able to go out and ride their bike or walk. This is something they're used to. So what you're doing is you're shortening their lifespan because now they can be confined into their home. When I go there now, like Mr. Richardson said, lesson your retail, yes, you have it. But when I see your people hanging out, I'm afraid they're looking at me. Just think about the ones who live
Ma'am,
there.
if you talk to us, I appreciate it. Thank you. If you just kind of talk this way, appreciate
For
it.
the hotel, again, the noise, you're gonna have a lot of noise. It's gonna be busy. It's a quiet community. You don't hear anything about crime. You bring in you are disrupting the livelihood of these people, of the community, of the senior citizen. Would you want someone to come in your neighborhood, your senior citizen community? There are older people living here for years. They know each other. They walk to each other's house. Affordable housing. What is affordable housing? 700,000. I was at the meeting. 700,000. That means you can't even offer the community the option outside. My daughter, I lived on James Island on the River Road, right 2 minutes away. My daughter is looking for a house. Good job. You think she can afford 700,000? I can't afford 700,000. How are you coming in a community that's been here for years? I don't have an engineering degree. I'm not a developer. I'm talking about experience and what we've been through, what they've been through, things that I hear, the stories that my grandmother tells, the stories that she tells me about the community, the people I don't really know. They constantly going over there every other day. They tell me about it. But I'm coming forth for this community. I am again, like you said, residential, fine, houses. What is When you come to the community, you gotta look at what's affordable for that community. And Jamestown is always growing. You bring outside people in, but these people been here all their life. You're disrupting their lives. And by doing that, you also shorten their lifespan. That's all.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for coming out. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, ma'am. Come on up. Or yes, sir, whoever. Ma'am, tell us who you are and where you live. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Julia Clayton Billy. I live at 1841 Old Folly Beach Road. I'm 72 years old. I'm the grandmother that rides bicycles with her grandson.
Good for you.
I have some pictures. We didn't have time to get to circulate. The first picture is my house, the picture of my house that's facing the three businesses, facing Senorita, the back, I can see the barrel from there, and there's another building. I love my front porch. I'm a front porch sitter. And like the other said, we've been through horrendous experience with noise. My house will be right next door to this development. When you're talking about hotel, I don't relish the idea of coming on my front porch and seeing a bunch of strangers ride past my house. That's happening already, but it's right now since the barrel has been sold, it's been minimized. So, like I said, the noise level and the interruptions with people living in a hotel, they can come and go as they please. My thing is, how are you going to maintain their noise level? Some of the pictures that you will see or that you ran through is a result of heavy traffic on our highway. Like when the Senorita will have Cinco de Mayo, there were cars all over our neighborhood, cars parked everywhere. We went through cars parked against my mailbox where I couldn't even receive my mail. And you go in and tell them not to park there, what do we get? We get cursed out. We get told, why don't you move? Why don't you sell your house? Well, that's not easy. That's our community. So I'm not opposed to the new people who will be coming in. What I'm opposed to is these hotels, these bed and breakfast or whatever you would call it. Traffic will be horrendous on that highway, on our road already. On part of the pictures you will see when someone, my aunt lived across the street and the house was demolished and the family member had to sell the house. We were told, well, of course, the family member sold the house with the intent that they will build a house there on that spot that's facing Folly Road. Well, push come to shove, what they put there was an ice house. Well, I hear the ice house day and night. People coming in to go early fishing, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. You hear the loud boom with the ice dropping in the truck. You will hear people with their radios going, coming to get ice. As far as Senorita is concerned, the business is fine. But like I said, I live right there in the heart of the noise level. My front door is facing his back door. Like I said, sometimes when he have entertainment, I can hear the music in my house. My kids call me deaf because I'm turning my TV up. Also, people will park along the side by my house or in front of my house. I have to put cones up and everything to try to have some kind of privacy. I can only imagine, like Mr. George said, when this thing is developed, livability is will be an issue for me next door. Can I sit on my front porch? I don't think so. So far as green space is concerned, you have to remember this is a rural area. We have green space because we have yards. We have swing sets for our children to play in. our grandchildren. I'm teaching my grandchild how to discern plants and everything. You go in the community, it's a different atmosphere. It is rural. We still have dirt roads. I don't know how long we're gonna have them on the Osborne Road. But what I'm saying is I'm opposed to a hotel because years from now, I'm not selling my mother's house. Years from now, I'd like to see that home pass to my daughter and my grandchildren. So it's real important that this commission be sensitive to our livability years from now. We are a community. Next door might be county, next door neighbor might be in the city, but nevertheless, it is the Beefield community.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, ma'am. Appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, sir. Was there someone else? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Isaac Washington. I'm living at 1837 Old Farm. I oppose this project because it's only compounding. It's being built and established in that area. It's only compounding an already existing problem. We have problems with the Folly Beach visitors on the weekend and the summer, forget about it. And we also have crowds in the Jewish community. This is going to break people. They won't stay, they'll not be concerned for the community as we are because we live there. It's home to us. And so we already know what happens when the drinking and the drugging, all that, when that takes place, it destroys the community. I believe at our point in time and age, we deserve a break. We've already, for 20 years, we've had problems with loud music, the shooting, the loud noise, the drinking. We've had that. We're getting a love, and we need a break. That's not living when you gotta live like that. All the uncertainty about your security and your peace. We just want some peace. That's all we want. We're not asking for much. I applaud business prosperity. I applaud that, but it's at the expense of the people that live in the various community houses. That's home to us. That's not home to those who come in and go, and they're not concerned. We have a personal stake in the matter. It's our home. We deserve some rest in our home, some peace. And so all that needs to be taken into consideration and also after justice is now. Not that for anybody else. So I oppose the establishment of a hotel. I oppose that because it's not going to help our already existing problem that we're having. It's going to compound this problem that we're experiencing every weekend. The summer months, forget about it. On Folly Beach, it attracts the visitors and the traffic. And during the summer months, sometimes they get off of Folly Road onto Old Folly Road and they come right through our community to avoid the traffic jam. And that's almost every day during the summer. So I'm opposing it and asking you all to consider our request.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out, sir. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, ma'am. Come on up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Green. This is my husband, William Green. We live on Lansdowne Drive, but we own property on Battery Island Drive. And on the right side of Folly Road, heading to Folly Beach, is a small neighborhood of homeowners that is divided between the city of Charleston and the Charleston County. The Beefield community, where homeowners are elderly people, retired people, living and maintaining their lives and homes on fixed incomes. We have been homeowners in this community for our entire lives, inheriting land from our ancestors. Recently, property in the county received historic preservation status, which protects against and or limits future development on properties in that area. Home zoned City of Charleston did not receive that status and is now threatened by overdevelopment, not only residential development, but commercial development. We may not be able to stop future development, but our concerns are valid. When it undermines our ability to keep our property with development of homes priced in the high six figures, bed and breakfast hotels, etc. This is a family-oriented community, and a project of this dimension can only subject residents to safety concerns, increased property taxes, and being swallowed up by excessive development. This area is low-lying, leading to excessive flooding. When developers build up their property to meet building codes and guidelines, where is water runoff going? Will the designed ponds, water runoff be sufficient? And I know he addressed this. The cost of flood insurance is astronomical in this area. There's a beautiful bay, creek, inlet, whatever you want to call it, across from Battery Island Drive that's being compromised under our noses for the purpose of development. Nature and its ultimate beauty is being destroyed before our very eyes. Nesting for cranes, herons, ducks, and other animals of the environment are at risk. The neighborhoods along Foley Road, from Fort Johnson Road to Foley Beach, are paralyzed by beach traffic. We can't get out of our neighborhood without fear of altercation with drivers who block the intersection or our driveways. The fire department has trouble getting through to respond to an emergency call. It would only get worse. Taxes are already excessive. That will only get worse. Change, progress, development is inevitable. But please be mindful, please be aware that this is our home. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing.
Yes, sir.
Addressing as far as the traffic is concerned, I retired from the fire department 40 years, two different entities. I retired from Station 4 right there on Farley Road as a captain there. Saturday mornings is horrible. I'd get up in the mornings, I had to make signs and put it out in the middle median of the highway with a flag on it saying, don't block the intersection. My wife was talking about the bay that was being compromised. Someone bought some property, I think over in the subdivision across from the pond. They had the real large water pipe, drain pipe. He somehow went in there, dug it up on low tide, dug it up. And this is, I'm talking about at least a 36-inch flume or even larger that ran from the old Farley Road to this what they used to call it a bay. So when the tide come in, the water would come in and flood the bay. He changed it over to, I think, either 6-inch PVC pipe. By doing that, at high tide, the other part of Farley Road, Battery Island Drive, was completely flooded. All of the marsh grass and everything went into people's yard, driveway, and everything. They didn't know anything about it. I personally went to the PSD and told them what was going on. And that was the reason why the left-hand side of the Battery Island Drive was being flooded. We've got to consider the people there. Consider what they're going through. I grew up in Red Top. Right now where C.E. Williams School is, Sanders Road was a two-lane dirt road. C.E. Williams is off of Sanders Road right now. I can walk to it. They're having a problem with cars. They got to get policemen to put out there and monitor the speed limit coming through this little section of Sanders. Change is inevitable. You can't stop change, but it's the way you go about change. And this is going to be a total disruption of the living capabilities on Battery Island Drive.
Thank you for coming out, sir.
Take in consideration of that.
Thank you for coming. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, sir.
James Green, 1857 Farley Road.
Yes, sir.
My driveway is the driveway where they're trying to get the zoning
and it goes through the property that's being developed. I've been there for 49 years. I don't oppose the hotel. I don't have no problem with I oppose the hotel. I don't have no problem with the residents, because it's gonna be a blessing to me if that happens, because my road goes right on through the property, okay? So that may be a blessing to me, but the hotel, I,
Yes, sir.
I'm against that.
Okay.
My driveway goes right by there, you know, when I'm coming through the area, I wouldn't wanna have whatever might be established at that hotel, whatever might come
Yes,
about,
sir.
I would not like to see that.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you for coming out. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Octavia Brown. I live in Somerville, South Carolina. I am one of Mr. Green's children. I'm the youngest daughter. My siblings weren't able to make it because they had to work. But what I want to say is that I too oppose the bed and breakfast slash hotel. When my parents mentioned to us what was going on, they asked that we'd be able to make it out, and I came out. So what I want to say is the driveway where this hotel is going to be next to, it actually leads to my parents' home. And the restaurant Senorita is across from it. They've had issues consistently. Sometimes I'm fearful coming over there to see them because I've been trapped and not able to get to them or leave. I've had to wait for an officer to come to pull a tag and locate the person that's blocking the driveway. My father's 71, my father's 74, my mother's 71, and they also take care of my grandmother, which is my mother's mother, who is 90 years old. So she stays at that residence, and even the fire department chief came and stated that because of all of the high traffic from the restaurant and blocking, they could not even get through in an emergency situation to get to any of my family. So we oppose it. I don't disagree with change or homes being built. I feel that it should be affordable housing. But I feel that it could be an issue. My kids, we have 5, they still come and visit. We spend holidays with them. Sometimes we spend the night with them. Familiar with the neighbors, our kids ride bikes in the neighborhood. Everybody knows them. But we oppose the hotel slash bed and breakfast. And we would like for it to be affordable housing in the neighborhood that would actually complement and go along with
Thank you.
private houses.
Thank you for coming out, ma'am. Anyone else? Okay. So if the applicant would like to respond, I know there's been a number of comments, so we appreciate you.
Thank you. Commissioners, thank you very much. Christopher Morgan, can I get you to do something for us, please? Are you able to pull up the zoning map that shows the zoning for the Old Folly Road? Specifically, I think it was 1841 was one of the parcels.
So we have our city zoning identified here. The other ones would be in the Charleston County jurisdiction. I don't have that application.
I've got a black and white that I'm going to share with you guys, and I apologize.
You can pass it around, yes,
make
sir.
a big copy, but what you will notice
Chris, could you,
is
I'm sorry,
that
one sec. Chris, could you put just because I like to look at it, the site map up again of the proposed? Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you.
what you'll notice on the Old Folly Road is that 96 to 97% of those homes actually have the same zoning that we have in the county, which is the commercial zoning. So in hindsight, I would say that, well, this kind of gives us an opportunity to set some criteria of a proper project within that area. We don't have a crystal ball, but having a real estate background as well, I would say simply that shall a future generation choose to sell that piece of property, if I were advising them, my advice would be you should sell for the best and highest value. Your best and highest value would not be based on saying that I just have a residential home. Your best and highest value would be based on saying I have a commercial piece of property. The current zoning is commercial. And here is a list of uses that are applicable under that zoning. thus giving and protecting owner rights. So if someone bought that piece of property, they're buying it and they're paying up. They're not paying that residential price, they're paying that price as a commercial property, as they should, because that's what the zoning calls for. Therefore, when they pay that up price, their plan will be to do something commercial that fits within that Folly Road overlay district in that whole landscape plan. Simply put, that's just inevitable in where things are going. Our goal is to try to set a bar, to set a standard, as opposed to kicking the can. I'm going to just try to tackle a couple of points.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes,
You
sir.
brought up about noise. I don't perceive, and again, y'all already said you wouldn't have a bar or restaurant, but
that's correct.
And how many rooms would a proposed bed and breakfast have? I'm just trying to remember.
There are 2 units. Each unit has 10 rooms. There's no rooftop area for people to hang out or anything like that. We have no bar, no restaurant. There's a little kitchenette where people are able to cook inside the rooms. We'll have a management staff. We would do ourselves an injustice to have noisy people in an inn that are staying in the residential homes. That would be contradictory of good business. And we like to think that we're
Yes, and the city has a noise ordinance, I'm sure, that would pertain to it. Go ahead, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to catch up.
Sure, secondary, another, one of the ladies made a great point. And that point was talking about, traffic out in front of the streets and not being able to get through. I'd like to add that we'll be advocates because those will affect our guests as well. I mean, if that's going on, that's going to affect our residents in the 16 homes as well. So we'll be right there on the phone, calling the city or calling the police or something like that, saying, guys, we've got a major problem. Let's solve this. There's more voices towards getting this done. I think that that's a good thing. And we're going to do our part to ensure that those things do not occur. Just a slight topic on the whole affordability aspect. We've agreed to partake in the conditions that were set forth, which within the conditions that we agreed to, we would be giving money that would be going towards affordable housing. And I think that that would be a quantifiable amount over a trajectory of time that we'll be proud of. I'm going to leave it with that. I only wanted to talk, wanted to discuss the technical data.
Yes, sir.
points.
Mr. Bailey, do you have something?
Yes, sir.
One question. Early in your comments, you said you wanted to state very emphatically in public for everyone to hear no ADUs, and I think you said no short-term rentals. Was there one other thing, or were those the 2 points that you made?
The 2 points were that on the residential homes, there would be no additional dwelling units, and short-term rentals would not be permitted.
And he also
You said long residences.
Yeah, in the residences, yes.
Right. He's also been to the conditions, I think, at the city.
Correct.
So my question is, would you have a problem with those, since you stated that, would you have a problem adding those to the conditions that Christopher recommended?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Anyone, Ms. Harrison, you have a
Just to have
question?
that clarified.
I have a question. I think I'll just like to comment.
Thank you. Go ahead, I'm sorry, you go ahead.
I'm going to let Joshua tackle a couple other things.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, Joshua.
Yeah, I'm going to respond to 2 comments.
Sorry. No, you got it, buddy.
We have I've already done the traffic study that would incorporate the conceptual use for the inn and the 16 residents. And we do know that the traffic study recommends we make some small intersection improvements at both intersections. So I don't know exactly what those will be, but we will have to coordinate extensively with DOT, specifically about those turning movements to the left and to the right, with some different striping and different signage. So I think it's really safe to say that this it's a small additional traffic load, but it's going to require us to make some improvements. It should benefit the whole community. And then the second thing is about the stormwater management study. Christopher, could you pull up the map that it's a kind of an enlarged view that shows there's one that shows the topography. It wasn't one of our maps, it was one of the ones that was on the city slides. Because I want to just show how our site drains into the bay. And while he's pulling that up, I'll just mention that we're in a city special protect. That's the one, right? Thank you. Because there are known flooding problems in the area, we're in a special protection area in the city. And so if you look on the left map, the left image, you see the narrow strip of part of land that goes up kind of to the northwest. And you see crossing that strip is a light blue colored right there, right? And that's a wetland, the jurisdictional wetland area. You can see that crosses the parcel that's included in the PUD, and then it makes kind of a straight, you can see it's a ditch, basically, canal system that drains out. And that's the ditch system that connects into the salt marsh. So the city stormwater staff required me to do a basin-wide study of that whole ditch system and that whole bay. Most of that property is in the county, so we've already begun coordinating with the county. So whatever we would do, any work on site would drain into that wetland system after it's gone through our multiple stormwater management features. But that's going to require a lot of coordination with the county and a basin-wide drainage study, which we've listed as one of the public benefits, because right now the city staff have no data and it requires back and forth coordination.
You'll be scrutinized by the guidelines, that's for sure.
Right. Right. And so there's, I mean, as the stories about the pipes and everything, we've observed that, and that's, I mean, the county knows about it being a problem, the city knows, but it just, we would be having to coordinate that and hopefully improve it.
Okay, y'all have met with the neighborhood associates, some of the neighbors?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, sir.
That was all I had.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. That'll close the public aspect of this. Commission members, questions? Yes, ma'am.
So I think, so let's just, I'm just be as frank as possible because I know the hour is late. So first of all, I'm going to recognize that y'all were here first. At the end of the day, y'all were here before we were, before I was, we were here before Rita was, and y'all are trying to fight for your scrap of land, and you're trying to say, I don't want to step off the sidewalk, the doggone it, there's no sidewalk to step off of. And I understand exactly the issue. Because at some points in times, you know, I have parents that are older. I have a father that's deceased, but I also have a parent that is in her 70s, and all she wants is peace and quiet.
Don't call 70s older now.
Well, let me tell you, 90 is going to be the new 30. In my 90 is the new 30.
I thought you might say that.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
But I've also had the opportunity to live downtown. And yes, I'm one of those folks that happen to be on King Street every so often and will get on party bus and you will dislike me. But that's neither here nor there. But what I started observing years ago is that it's really hard to, you know, bring people to these big high concepts when all you just want is just to preserve your peace and quiet and be left alone and for people to respect you. And I think that's kind of where there's this little bit of ambiguity about what is affordable, what is a hotel, what isn't. And I'm sitting in a position where I have a bed and breakfast. I have a short-term rental, and I've just finished building a 20-room bed and breakfast right off of Line Street, which of course just is the tip of the iceberg of what would be considered gentrification. And it dawned on me what was being really talked about, which is property values will go up, property taxes, which of course to me is the word gentrification. And that's what you're really most concerned about. And, you know, there's this great, and it took me a minute, and then I figured, and it just light bulb clicked on. And what I want to talk about is the fact that what they're most concerned about is the fact that the pressure point of anything that's new always brings the pressure of somebody wanting to push you out, or that the space that is around them that is being built around them isn't a place that is inviting them to be a participant in the space. And I didn't understand that until I observed where I live and still imbibe and eat is on King Street, which is some of the restaurants that are on King Street between King and Race, where you have people who will actually walk by it and not enter it because they don't feel that it's actually a place for them to be participating in. And, I remember when we were building the building on Line Street, I was asked, what's the rental rate? And I cringed because I knew that it would seem as though we weren't trying to participate or welcome the person across the street. So I think that's really some of the issue. And I think some of the issue is what's happening over on across the street, because that is the issue. And so, when you've been in a place that for over 50 plus years and you can't get someone to not park or block your sidewalk, and that just it sticks right there, and you'll never forget it. And I think the approach here is maybe a better understanding of how this will not result in gentrification. Because what can actually happen on the site is a hotel, because I think the commercial zoning is permits it. And the applicant said, well, talked about all the houses here are zones commercial neighborhood. Really what he's just trying to say, y'all, and I'm not trying to interpret it or translate, it's y'all know y'all have commercial property, y'all know it's own commercial. But what you just don't want to do is be bothered by the people who are running through the neighborhood and disrupting your life. And I think a lot of that comes from the management side of it. Because after it's built, is it going to be respectful of you and give you the peace and quiet, and it's going to have enough of a buffer? And I think that's really what we have to find out through the rest of the process, is whether or not you're going to get the buffer that you require. Because a hotel doesn't have to be noisy. A bed and breakfast doesn't have to be noisy. It's actually supposed to be more quiet, because the people that are around it are residents, and so that's really what it's basically within inside of a residential area. And so it's supposed to be more quiet and accommodating, rather than you see sheets of towels hanging over the balcony kind of thing. Yeah. So I think really it's a matter of actually understanding that one day somebody will talk to you as though they actually have been there and walked in your shoes and understand that. And I think that's where I think some of this, I think some of the problems are, because I think itself before the PUD could also, the commercial zone property could have a PUD, and he's actually reducing the amount of density. And the unfortunate part about affordability is that we will never get to a point where you'll find that balance between what it costs to build a house and what it costs to buy a house, and what it costs and what people are earning. And we'll never, well, one day I hope we will, but we will get there.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Ms. Johnson?
I think Ms. Harrison said that very eloquently, and I think you captured the essence of what's going on. But one of the things that could be really beneficial to the community should this pass is I'm hearing you say that there's on-site management.
Yes, ma'am.
And with an on-site manager there, you would likely, as y'all work together, you would likely have access to somebody who could handle if there's an issue. I assumed it was 24/7.
That's correct.
And that could be just, it could take the burden off of you if there are issues, if you had a point of contact that you could reach out to and say, hey, somebody's, I don't know that you can handle anything with the restaurant, but just as far as the community goes, if there are problems, the manager there could really be an asset to the community if y'all work together.
We would be glad to ensure that there's, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak.
Yeah, that's all right.
My apologies. But just to answer you, to continue on what you're saying, we would be glad to ensure that there's a direct communication with the community to the staff.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bailey?
I thought I'd learned my lesson and let Mr. Lassane go first. Because he said it well earlier about we
we get the difficult stuff. You know, and frankly, if I could wave a wand, what I would love is for a conservation organization to buy land like this. But these guys own it. They own it. I think they are going to develop it. I think they're going to develop it whether we approve this PUD or not, just based on where it is. And so I haven't heard a lot of opposition other than the affordability to the housing piece. And so by my calculation, I think they're proposing 16 houses, whereas the current zoning would allow 20 something. So there are fewer houses than what they could go build right now. And then the hotel piece, I get it. But I think they could build that right now too. The transient part of a hotel, I understand why. I mean, that, again, I think that bothers folks, and I get it. But they're saying no short-term rentals and no accessory dwelling units. So, you know, I think the net of this is what they are proposing is better than what you have now. In addition to the fact that they have hired an engineer with all sorts of experience with hydrology and environmentally friendly building practices and so forth. And so Ms. Harrison said, well, we get the angst, but I think what they are offering is the best outcome considering, short of a conservation organization just buying the thing and never putting anything there. And so I'll see if any other commissioners want to comment, but I would move for approval.
Okay, so you're moving for approval. Ms. Jacobs, you go ahead. With all the conditions, you move approval, all the conditions. Absolutely. And the conditions you agreed upon in addition to that.
And I might ask for a couple of conditions too, but I'd like to say something. I hear this so strongly, but I also live on what I call a residential commercial border, where you need to understand this integrity. Because you have to have your house be peaceful and livable, and you have to allow the commerce to exist and be productive. I'll tell you exactly where I live, right behind Jean's Hog Brown. There's a big concrete wall there. And there is the most important thing you can do right there is what I think this PUD will do. Become a good neighbor. You write your good neighborness into your PUD somehow with what you commit to, and you bring that commitment to it so that you have the best commercial and residential property you can have, and these people have peace. And you can do that. We can do that. We can be good neighbors. We've heard their concerns. If there's anything you can incorporate into this further, voluntarily as you go along to enable them to be peaceful, I sort of trust that you will. I know what Josh Robinson has done for the community. I trust that he heard that too. A couple things I would like to think about, maybe consider adding to this PUD is if you would, I know the language is in there. It says ADU shall not be developed. I already saw that language. But since you committed to not allowing STRs, this is something we need to talk about because being annexed into the city in the PUD, they come under STR rules in the city where somebody could STR their unit, could go and rent the room inside of it. If they choose to be a good language, choose to be a good neighbor, maybe you want to write that language into your PUD to say, even though it's allowed in the city, we're going to restrict it to these houses. Something for you to think about. To have the language literally in the letter, language in the PUD. The other thing I would like to, I didn't see this in the PUD, I'm sure with the work that Josh Robinson does, that they would consider this, is that all the parking pavers under houses and everything be pervious. I would love to see the right-of-way be pervious material. I know it exists structurally. I think that would run afoul of some of the conditions in the city where they have like concerns about driving trucks, emergency trucks over right-of-way. If we could get around that somehow, then you can make every You know this, you're aware of it exists in the world, where you can make all those surfaces pervious. Where you even have these space to be pervious surface. But I would like to release the information in the PUD that would make at least the parking.
Okay.
One last thing I'd like to consider, because and I don't know if this pump station actually exists on your design right now, but you could even buffer the community, bring up that design one step further by putting your pool that you're proposing on the front of the hotel. That way people don't gather protected in the back of the hotel, they have a party and make it noisy for neighbors. Move the pump station to the back of the hotel, move the drainage ponds that were in the back of the hotel.
Ms. Jacobs will redesign that, okay?
Redesign your program. In addition to your vegetative buffer that you committed at 25 feet, if you move those services to the back, you just create more buffer that you need for any kind of noise. If it's possible to consider, I'm not gonna mandate it in a.
That's okay.
You know,
finish it.
really, I think that speaks to that good neighbor, to these people who've expressed their concern. Because everybody else has said this tonight, they by right can do things that y'all really wouldn't want done without even coming. And so what they're doing by coming here is they have listened to you, and they're gonna do the best product they can do. Because they already have a right by zoning in the county to build that hotel.
And if you talk to other commission members, I know you're speaking up.
No, I would telling that I'm answering.
Okay. All right. Thank you. You finished with Jacobs?
So I would like to see if we could add, are we allowed to add that language for them?
I mean, if that's what the commission
What,
wants to do.
you
I'm
want to
writing
amend something,
notes
go ahead and
of-
tell us exactly
Yeah,
what
I
you want
want
to amend.
to amend it that they would write the statement about the S2 already.
So I added under the conditions of
Yep.
no short-term rentals in the houses.
Correct, and that they use pervious material in their parking.
So I'm adding all parking areas to be pervious material. And
I'm
then,
sure they were deciding anyway, but.
Okay, we can add with it.
and then,
Are you okay with that, Ms. Bailey? Okay.
and then I was paraphrasing what you said, Ms. Jacobs, but I added another one to say, study the pump station location relative to hotel and neighbors. And
the pool.
And the pool.
That would be hard and fast. That would be study it versus saying, you know, private. So.
Exactly, so I don't think we can.
Okay.
Because I know sometimes
Anything
the
else,
pump
Ms. Jacobs?
stations have to be in certain locations because of elevation or where the sewer lines are or whatever, so.
Ms. Jacobs, you got anything else?
No, those were.
You finished redesigning this project?
Yes, I am.
All right.
I'm listening to
We can't go back to the public. I'm sorry. We just closed the public aspect, so I'm not trying to cut you. Thank you.
I'll be brief, I promise.
No, you go
Just,
ahead.
I feel obligated to state for the record, because this project is outside the urban growth boundary, that I'm grateful to staff for working with the property owner and the developer on the PUD, which as Mr. Bailey rightly pointed out, results in a development with less density than is allowed by right. And I think, this edge of the urban growth boundary on James Island is always complicated whenever we deal with it. And I'm a little disappointed that former council member Jackson isn't here today, because she was, a strong supporter of the boundary on James Island, whereas the county has abandoned it on James Island. But I do think, this is the best solution that could reasonably be gotten for, a property on the edge of the boundary in this part of James Island. So I'm going to support this.
Anyone else? Is you okay?
I just want to say that I do applaud the efforts that have been put forth by the property owners and the developers, as well as and so much support the community. I live on the peninsula. I live on a little short street, and when I moved in that area, it was quiet. I'm now surrounded by Renzo's, O'Reilly's, Berkeley's Cafe, like a thrown stowaway. I have 2 little kids that don't quite go outside and play because of the traffic that speeds up and down that little short street. And with that being said, I'm torn as far as where I want to go on this. However, we do have before us what we are, what the outline is, what the elements are, and how we should move forward on this particular project. And just thinking about it all, this is probably the best fit for this piece of property that they do own. And that's really hard for me to say. That's really hard, given the fact that Beefield community is what it is. So I'll just leave it right there.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. You know, I was going to say that, first of all, the traffic out there is horrendous anyway. This is Folly Beach. I mean, you know, I wouldn't even talk about going out there on Saturdays. That's just that area, you know, the weekend at all. Or actually, probably during the week, it's crazy. It's just traffic everywhere. It's crazy. So I feel for you folks with the traffic issue. I don't think this place is going to cause you any more traffic. I'm hopeful they'll improve the intersections as they talked about, be required to, that hopefully alleviate some of the more local things and the roads and things like that. But, you know, I'm going to pick on a couple of people because I know Mr. Shear and I know Mr. Cohen's father, I think, but I would lean on these guys because these are good community people. And I think you can use these guys to make your community even better because they think about community and they care about community. And I know you have concerns about this, but I continue to meet with them. I think they'll help your community. I think they'll be an asset to your community. So I'm going to join. I think you made a motion with all the conditions.
Including her amendment.
Right, all that. And Ms. Johnson's going to second it with all the conditions, and I think you have all the conditions. And I'm going to support the motion. If there's no other comments, all in favor of the motion with the conditions, signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? So I guess there's 7 in favor and none opposed. So we appreciate your coming out. I know it's been a long day for y'all, and we hear you. And we want to try to make things better, not anymore. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is, let's see here. So we got some zonings. Mr. Morgan, can we take any of these zonings together? Jerry, I didn't mean to pick on you, but hopefully. Mr. Morgan, can we take any of these zonings
together? Let's see. We could probably do this together. Together because, yeah.
Hold on. Let's finish this up. We've got zonings now, and I'm going to read into the record. Zonings number 1. Should I read? How many should I read together, Mr. Morgan?
I think you can do them all.
Okay, so I'm going to read the zonings in the record. Number 1 is 827 Trent Street, Melrose, West Ashley, TMS number 31002000155, close to 1.031 acres. Request for zoning SR1, it was R4 in the county. Number 2 is 2 Trail Hollow Drive, Shadow Moss, TMS number 358070051.63 acres, request SR1, it was R4 in the county. Number 3 is 7 Oakdale Place, Avondale, TMS number 4181500055.25 acres. Again, requesting SR1, it was R4 in the county. So these are all pretty similar. Number 4 is 1630 Wahoo Drive, Pinecrest, Garden, West Ashley, TMS number 35112000006. What's the small one? 0.05 acres. It's SR2.
And I do want to point out that's a little bit of an odd one because this was already subdivided and built on in the county. But we're doing it as close as we can with the SR2, but there still might be some nonconformities if they were adding to it. So, yeah.
So number 5 is 1592 Southwick Drive, Fenwick Hills, Jones on TMS number 279070057.36 acres. Again, SR1. There's a request for zoning, and it was R4 in the county. Mr. Morgan?
Yeah, and basically, as you said, they're all single-family residential. Some are SR2. There's only one SR2, excuse me, which is 1630 Wahoo, which is that really smaller.
These are the closest zoning to the county.
That is correct. That's what we try to do. Okay. And I did neglect to point out that Molly Jones was here with us tonight, our annexation coordinator.
Ms. Jones, 5. We'd like to comment. We'd like to see a minimum of 7, but 5 is good. Do you have a goal for next month?
I see it's harder now because I've got every 2 weeks. So I've got to figure out how much. But I definitely always have something to look at.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but do you go to some of these ones in the county and talk to them? Is that what you do? Yeah. They're doing our homes? Okay.
Yeah,
good.
If they're eligible or soon to be.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course.
Mr. Morgan,
any ideas, let me know.
All right, Mr. Morgan, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, that was it. That was
So,
it.
move for approval. Mr. Bailey moves for approval, second by Mr. LeGree. Aye. All in favor? I'm sorry. I got
It's
everybody.
Charleston, you can say.
No. But I think of LeGree when I think of Mr. Bailey. By Mr. Lassane, second by Mr. Lassane. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? So that's 7 in favor, none opposed. Let's go to the minutes if we can. I know Miss Jacobs, I'm gonna refer to Miss Jacobs on these. But she scrutinized these minutes pretty well. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as emailed out with correction?
I've already spoken with Mr. Clapper about an issue in July, and in the August 17th minutes, there was on page 6, item 5. I voted no, not Erica Harrison.
I thought you had voted no. I read that and I said, yeah.
And so with those two amendments that
I'd like to leave you as a positive vote on that, but anyway, that's it.
I know, it was me.
So you're making a motion with those changes that we approve the minutes?
Yes, I do.
All right. Second? Nobody's fighting.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
But I want to strike from tonight's minutes Ms. Harrison's comments about you being old.
No, she said 70 something. I think what she said was 70 years old. I'm 66, just for the record. I'm only 66, but I mean, close.
Officially not old.
I said 70 is not old.
You need 30 over here.
Yes, she didn't say me.
The oldest member of the planning.
I thought I was, but that's okay. So thank you, Mr. Bailey. I appreciate it.
Sunday's not here to speak for her.
Yeah, no, you're right. I forgot Sunday would be.
I'm older than Sunday.
And for the record, I think Sunday's was out of town and got sick again, but hopefully she'll be back next month. So all in favor of Mr. Bailey, second by Ms. Johnson's, right?
Sure, yes.
Signify by saying aye. Aye. Staff updates?
Yes, so I think you all are most interested in, number one, downtown plan or peninsula plan. We are, meeting next week with a group that will, select the, and then send it to city council. So assuming it can be selected next week, then negotiations and council approval in October and have them on board probably November. Although we probably won't begin a lot of engagement activities until the new year because of, once you get into November and December. And the zoning ordinance RFPs are due back in later this month. Then there'll be a selection committee on that. That'll be a little bit later in October and probably late October to early November for selection on that. So,
When you said you're talking about, but you haven't identified people who are be on the downtown plan committee.
oh, no. Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry,
you said-
what I'm talking about is selection committee of consulting groups.
Okay,
that will
okay.
work for the city. On
Okay,
this.
that's okay. I didn't know.
Both of these I'm talking about the selection group for the bidders for the plan work.
Okay.
And the zoning work.
And
Union Pier.
go ahead.
And then Union Pier, they're having their big meeting. You all should
Thursday,
have gotten something about the 29th, which I'm looking at some weather advanced stuff, and the 29th is not looking very good. But anyway, they are planning a day-long thing, the 11th through the 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. that day at Union Pier itself. You can drop in anytime and see that. So.
And then there is on Sunday from 2 to 4, this open house about the DAR review of city height districts.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know, did everybody receive an email about this? The proposed amendments includes, this is, possible changes to Old City height districts. They're having a drop-in from 2 to 4 on the same day here in this building. Distinct for people to drop in and express concerns. And then I also wanted to tell you what I heard in the development meeting last week, is that the department has put in the budget request to get an affordable housing concierge position.
We've actually done that for a number of years.
And if we get that, what that concierge is supposed to do is go out and look at other communities, how they're in the nation, and find other plans and other things. So keep your fingers
I mean,
crossed.
like plans that people can just do kind of
Yes,
uh,
what's working in other areas.
Good.
And it also helps facilitate throughout the city's complicated process affordable housing. Chloe Stuber from our office is doing that right now, is about 25 to 30% of her job, but this would be a full-time person for that.
like basically shepherding it.
Yes, because there's so many projects coming in. I was a little bit offended when somebody said something tonight, that there was only one affordable housing development going on, which is completely not true. There's never been more affordable housing being built in cities. You know, it's
So let's
still
keep
not
our
enough,
fingers
but it's a
crossed
tremendous
for
amount going on.
council for that position, and that would be helpful to our cause.
Anything else? Yeah, there was one commission member, a couple of them said, it may be beneficial to have, some, a chairman, a planning director come back and occasionally give us updates.
Okay.
Is that something, you know?
Maybe we should just put it as a quarterly thing.
Yeah, I think we'd like to see him a little bit more regular.
Okay.
So we know who he is, and I see him on TV sometimes.
Been here
you know.
once.
Yeah.
See him on TV.
Yeah, so maybe if we'd ask him to come
Some of the
aboard
Zoom
with
meetings,
us and
cameo
give us
appearance.
updates on what he sees, so we can look at the future. And
I guess I think what it is, we're so used to like a Tim King and a John.
yeah, we see
Being
these
so
guys
forward
often, and
facing.
so we love Christopher and the folks you have at staff, but we want to pick on this guy too. We want to rough him up a little bit as well. So thank you all. Appreciate everyone's sleep. You know.
Stand adjourned.
Yes, man. Appreciate it, man. Long.
Yeah.
Got my parking pass.